Hey, welcome back. If you're looking at my desk right now and you're asking, wow, why is there so much CRUD on it? Well, you're on to something. This section is all about CRUD. Yeah. So CRUD is an acronym. It stands for four things: C-R-U-D, create, read, update, and delete. And they are the four basic actions that we want to be able to do to our data. So we've actually seen two components already. We've seen how, let's say we're working with users. We've seen how to create users with the insert command. We've seen how to read users, take them back out, spill the milk out of the database. That is the read section, which we did with select. Now we also are going to review more about select and insert, but primarily we're going to see how to update and delete information. So how do we change something in our database if we made a mistake, or let's say a user changed their password. They clicked a forgot my password link and they want to reset it. We need to change it in the database. And then delete, let's say our user decides to leave our site for some really bad reason. We can delete him or her. So that's the focus of this section. We're going to have a ton of exercises because we're seeing a lot of commands. And now that we have those four commands in place, we'll be able to go do a lot of stuff. They're kind of the fundamental four things of any database or any data. So tons of challenges coming up. Look forward to that. And I'll see you basically in the next section when I have to do another one of these videos. See you in a bit. Alrighty. So in this section, we're going to focus on the basics of something called CRUD. So it's an acronym, C-R-U-D, and it stands for create, read, update, and delete, or destroy, some variation of that. The idea is that these are the four main operations that we perform on our data. We've already seen how to create data. When we have a database, we want to be able to add data in. We want to be able to search back or read it back out. We want to be able to update it, and then also to delete it. Those are the four most important and most common operations that we'll do. And CRUD itself, the acronym, is not particular to databases. It's common in other facets of programming and web development, but it's a nice acronym that fits what we are trying to do here. So what we're going to do is step through all four different operations. And we've already seen create. It should be review, hopefully, which we do using insert into. So going back to our cats, we have things like insert into cats, name and age, and then the values, taco and 14. So we won't spend any more time talking about create in this section, but we'll be using insert into throughout the rest of the course. But really what we're going to focus on here are the other three operations. So how do we read data out? How do we search? How do we find things? How do we update data if we made a mistake or something changes? And then how do we delete data? How do we delete everything from a table, and how do we delete one or two things at a time? So that's really what this section will focus on. And we'll kick it off by talking about reading data out. Okay, so before we see any new code or new commands, I want to clean up the data that we currently have. If you remember, we kind of added a bunch of different cats databases. We have cats and cats 1 and cats 2 and cats 3 and so on. What I want to do is delete the original cats table, and then we're going to remake it, but with a few additions, because our original cats table was the most basic. It only had name and age, but I want to add some other data in, like an ID that auto increments and so on. So basically, we're just going to remake the cats table and add new data in. So if you want to make a bit of an exercise out of this, the first step would be to delete the cats table. So do that now. And the command, if you want to see it, is drop table cats. So let's do it. Drop table cats. Whoops. There we go. And now that we've dropped the table, we want to recreate the table. So this is what we want here. We're going to have a cat ID, integer not null, auto increments. We're going to have a name, that's a varchar, a breed, that's a varchar as well, an age that is an integer, and cat ID is our primary key. So if you'd like, go ahead and type that out, or just copy it, paste it in. Perfect. Of course, we could make sure it worked. Describe cats. There we go. All right, so the last step here is to add new data in. And I would like for you to have this same data because we're going to use it throughout this section. There'll be a couple of activities and questions, and it will be much easier if you have the same data as me. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cats. Each one has a name, a breed, and an age. Some of them, there's a couple of Maine Coons, a couple of Tabbies, and a couple that have the same age, which we will use in just a little bit. So copy this, or if you're a masochist, you can type it out, paste it in. Perfect. And now we have 7 cats in our database, 7 rows. Okay, so now we've prepped our data. We've deleted the original cats table, remade a new special cats table with some more interesting pieces of data, and then we've inserted data in there as well. Awesome. Next, we're going to move on to talking about searching or reading data out. So we're moving on to the R of CRUD, which is read. How do we retrieve and search data from a database? And we've actually already seen this. The magic command is select. So remember when we were doing this earlier, select star from cats? I told you not to worry about it too much because we'd spend more time on it. And it was really just something that we needed to have to check our work at that time when we were inserting data. But we didn't actually talk about how it works, what the star means. That's what we're going to do now. So the star in select star from cats means give me all the columns in the cats table. So we're asking for the cats table, that's the from cats, and in that table we just want everything that we have. So in our case, that means cat ID, name, age, and breed. We want all of them coming back to us. So let's do that now. Select star from cats. You can see we get cat ID, name, breed, and age. And we also get every single cat. No one is missing. These are the 7 that we inserted. So that's the basics of select star, which you'll use often just to check things out. But we can also get more specific about what data we want back, which is where the select expression comes in. Basically, there's a way for us to specify what columns we want in particular. I only want the ID, or I only want cats' names and age, but not the breed. So to do that, rather than saying select star, we can do things like select name from cats. And if we do that, select name from cats, what do you think the table will look like? It looks like this. We only get name. So it gives us all 7 names, but nothing else. We could also do select age from cats. And hopefully this is what you expected. We just get a bunch of ages. And just to hammer it home here, we could also do a select, let's do cat ID from cats. And we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's useful enough, but oftentimes we want more than one piece of data, but we don't want everything. And that's where this comma separated list comes in. So this whole thing is the select expression. We're saying select name and age from cats. So we can try it now. Select name, comma, age from cats. And what do you think we'll see? So we get a table with name and age returned back. So there's no limit on that. We could do name, age, comma, cat ID, comma, breed, which would be the same thing as select star. We could do name, age, and breed, or cat ID and name and age, and so on. I think you get it. We can mix and match whatever fields we want back. So just to illustrate my point, let's do a select cat ID, comma, name, comma, age from cats. And we hit enter, and we get those 3 fields. Notice we're missing breed, but we could just go add that in if we wanted. And notice that the order matters. So I said cat ID, then name, then age, then breed. And that's what we get. But if I just did a select star, it uses the default order, which is cat ID, name, breed, and then age, which is just how we entered it when we created the table. So I could reverse it if I wanted to by select age, then breed, then name, then cat ID from cats. And there we go. Okay, so that's pretty much all there is to the select expression, for now at least. where we're just specifying exactly which columns we want, or we can default and use the star, which will give us all columns. Okay, so what we've seen so far allows us to specify what columns we want, name and age only or only ID, but it still gives us every single result in the table. So if we have 10,000 users in our database, if we wanted to select one, we don't have a way of doing that right now. We only can select all of them, which really is not that useful. And in fact, most of the time when you're selecting things, you're doing it deliberately and you're trying to find particular pieces. You're not just trying to check in on your table, make sure everything's okay. You're usually trying to, let's say, sign someone in if it's an application. You're trying to verify, find someone by their username and check if their password matches that they entered into your website, or something like that, where you're searching for specific data. And to do that, we need to use what's known as the where clause. So it's another magic keyword, where, and it allows us to get specific. It allows us to say, I want all cats who are 4 years old, or I want all cats who are tabbies. And those are very simple examples, but later on, throughout this course, we'll continue to expand your arsenal for select and for searching. You'll be able to do things like, I want all cats that are tabbies between the age of 1 and 2 and whose name starts with the letter B, let's say. So we'll be able to get much more specific, but for now, we're focusing on the basics. And as a side note, I want to show you that we will use where all the time. So it's not just for searching or for selecting, but we'll need to use it when we're updating or deleting things as well, because unless we're trying to update every single thing or delete every single thing, usually we want to update something specific. So we might say, I want to update the cats where their age is 2 and I want to make their age 3, versus I want to update every single cat to have an age of 3. We could be more targeted using where. So we're going to start by seeing how we use it to select. So here's an example. Select star from cats where age is 4. So notice the syntax here. We have our same select star from cats. That will give us all cats. But then we have this where age equals 4. So what this will do is only select the data from the cats table where the age column is equal to 4. And if we try that now, if we look at our data, actually, you'll see we have 2 cats, Ringo and Egg, who are both 4 years old. So if we do a select star from cats, you see what we get. But now if we modify that with our where age equals 4, semicolon, we only get those 2 results. So we still get cat ID, name, breed, and age because we use star. That tells us the columns. But now we only have 2 results because we used where to get specific. One note, notice that when I refer to age here, that is the column, age. So there's no quotes around it, it's just age. So we can do the same thing here, but this time I'm using name to drill down or to get specific. So select star from cats where name is equal to egg. And notice I use quotes here because it's no longer an integer like age is. Name is varchar, it's text, so we need those quotes. So we can try that now. Select star from cats where name equals egg. Just like that. And you notice we get egg. Cat ID, name, breed, and age. One side note while I'm here. You may come across this at some point. What do you think will happen if I fully capitalize egg? It still works. So it's important to note that by default, this is case insensitive. So I could do lowercase g, uppercase g, and it still gives me the same data. So we'll see ways around this later on. Oftentimes it is useful, though, to not worry about case if you're dealing with things like an email address where case doesn't actually matter. So if a user types in their email with a capital letter at the beginning versus lowercase, it should still be the same email in your database. But we'll talk about that later. I just wanted to point out that it's a thing, case insensitivity. So that's all there is for now to the where clause. Now there is a lot more that we will be seeing and working with. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this lesson, we will come back and use where all the time. And in fact, we're going to continue to use it for updating and deleting, like I said, we need to specify what we want to delete and what we want to update. But I just want to make it clear we're not done with where. There's a lot of add-on functionality that we'll see in ensuing sections. Perfect. All right, so before we go any further, we have a couple of quick exercises that are just going to test you basically on what we just learned, select and where. So the first one, I'd like you to write the SQL that will select the following. And this is using our cats. So the same data that we already had, which is why I asked you to, hopefully you inserted the same cats. Basically, select all the cats, but only get their ID. And then the next thing I'd like you to do, of course, you can pause the video and do it, and then move on when you're ready to the next question, which is write the SQL that will select the following. Name and breed only. So we don't want ID, we don't want age, just name and breed in that order for all of the cats. All right, and the next one is a little bit more complicated. You'll need to combine both things we just learned, the select expression and the where clause. So in this case, you're going to only select the tabby cats, so the cats that have breed equal to tabby, and we only want name and age. And then finally, this is a little bit of a challenge because I didn't show exactly how to do this, but hopefully you'll be able to figure it out. We'll talk about it in the answer video either way, but hopefully it's not too difficult. In this case, what you're doing is selecting the instances where cat ID and age are the same. So if I go back to the data here, when I select all of them, if you look here, cat ID and age, they're not the same. 1 and 4, 2 and 10, but Egg's cat ID is 4 and Egg is 4 years old. And Jackson has an ID of 7 and is 7 years old. So how can you select just those two? And I don't want you to cheat. Don't select based off of their name or their breed or something. I want you to select where cat ID is the same as age. And we only want cat ID and age as well. Okay, solution video is coming up next. So let's see the answers here. Feel free to skip forward if you feel like you got them right. So the first one, write the SQL that selects the following. We only want the cat IDs, but we want all of the results, all the cats. So that will be select cat ID from cats. So we want all cats, but only the cat ID returned, and that's what we get. Next up, write the SQL query that selects the following. Name and breed for all cats. So it's similar to the last one, except we want name and breed from all cats. There we go, name and breed. Okay, so let's talk about the solution to this one here. We need to use both the select expression and the where clause. We want to select name and age from cats where breed equals tabby. So let's do that. Select name, comma, age from cats where breed equals tabby, just like that. And we get Ringo, who's 4, and Misty, who is 13, and that's exactly what we wanted to see. Now the final one is a little trickier, as I mentioned. We didn't see exactly how to do this, but hopefully you were able to figure it out because it's exactly the same syntax, but we're just checking a slightly different where clause. So we'll start with the first part. We want to select cat ID and age. So that's a select cat ID, comma, age from cats where, and we want where cat ID is the same as age. So we've been doing things like where age equals 2, or we could do where cat ID equals 1, but we can also just do where cat ID equals age. Those are both going to be numbers, and MySQL is smart enough to figure that out. So it's going to compare cat ID and age and see where they're equal. As you can see, we get what we want, cat ID and age, and they're equal. So let's go back and revise this a bit and do a select star, just so you can see exactly what we're working with. We have Egg and Jackson, where age is 4, ID is 4, age is 7, and ID is 7. Okay, so in addition to having some practice there, we also learned that you can compare columns and the values rather than just picking an exact value like 4 or 10. We can compare two different columns and select based off of when they're equal to one another. All right. So one more thing we're going to talk about with reading data when we're talking about CRUD, before we move on to updating and deleting, there's one other thing, which are aliases. These are really simple, very short video here. Basically, we can specify how our data should be displayed back to us. So what that means is, rather than having cat ID, name, breed, and age here, I could tell MySQL that instead of breed, I want type of cat, or instead of age, I want years. And it won't alter the data itself. It just is how it's displayed to me. So let me show you a more specific example. Here we have, using an alias, we're selecting the cat ID as ID. So rather than saying cat ID in the results, it will only say ID and then name from cats. Now this is not that clear why it's useful, and that won't become clear for a little bit because right now our data is very simple and straightforward. But once we have multiple tables and we're selecting from, let me give you an example. Let's say we have a pet shelter where we have a cats table and a dogs table, and both of them have a name. So dogs have names, cats have names. And when we talk about join tables, which you'll learn about in a little bit, that's when we take both tables and we select from them at once and combine them. And the results, we would have two columns with name. So we would need to figure out which one is cat name, which one is dog name. So we could use this as to relabel it. So it wouldn't change the actual data. Our data is the same, the columns are the same. But when it's printed back out to us, when it spits out the data, it would use an alias. So if we try this now, cat ID as ID, comma name from cats, you'll see that we get ID here. And just to make that clear, I did the same thing, and I even put a little arrow pointing to that ID. It doesn't say cat ID, it says ID. So also just to prove this, we could do something like select name as cat name, or also just to show you, you can use quotes to add spaces. So cat name, like that, comma, we'll also select breed as kitty breed. Why not? From cats. And there you go. Our new column headers here are cat name and kitty breed. But of course, if we do a describe cats, you'll see nothing has changed. Our fields are still name and breed, just when we print them out. So that's all there is to aliases. You'll see us using them later on, but I wanted to introduce them now so that you're not overwhelmed with a bunch of new stuff when we get to join tables. Alrighty, so we've covered the C and the R in CRUD, create and read. Now we're moving on to the U, which stands for update. So how do we update or alter existing data in our database? We've inserted something and maybe we made a mistake. We want to change it, but it's not always a mistake. In our applications, let's say we have users. Think about when you're updating your password. You forgot a password as a user, so you click the forget password link and you reset your password. Well, that needs to be changed in the database. Or you change your profile picture on Facebook, or you change your, relationship status or something. All of that requires updating. So how do we do it? And the answer is that we use probably the longest SQL command you've seen so far. There's multiple parts, but the keywords are update, set, and where. So we've already seen where. This is where we tell MySQL which items in particular we want to select to update. So in this case, this entire line here is going to find in the cats table all the cats who have a breed of tabby. And we're going to change that breed to be short hair. So again, we have update and a table name, then set, and this is a list of the changes we want to make. So in this case, I'm setting the breed to be short hair. And then who do we want to, or who is the wrong way of saying it, but what do we want to perform it on? What is the actual data? In this case, breed equals tabby. So I will go ahead and just copy this line, move over here, and if I do a select star from cats, you can see that we have two tabbies right now, Ringo and Misty. If I paste this line in, update cats, change their breed to be short hair if their breed is tabby, and now we select star again, you can see that both tabbies, or previously tabbies, are now short hairs. Ringo and Misty. So here's another example. Let's say I wanted to change Misty's age to be 14. Right now, Misty is 13. And we realize that her dental records are wrong. Apparently you can tell how old a cat is from their teeth. So we misjudged how old she was, and we want to make her 14 now. So to do that, it looks like this. Update the cats table. Set age to be 14. We don't need quotes this time because we're working with a number, an integer. And we only want to do that if name is Misty. So let's try it. Now select star again. Or if actually we want to be more specific, we could do select star from cat where name equals Misty. Let's try that again without that extra L at the end. You can see Misty is now 14 rather than 13. The last thing that I'll mention about updating is that there's a good rule of thumb that you should follow. When you're updating something, you should make sure that you're targeting the right data before you actually do the update. So basically run the equivalent select using your where query. And once you make sure that returns the data you expect, then update it, just so that you avoid accidentally updating the wrong data. And the same holds true when we talk about deleting, which we'll do in just a moment. But the core idea is that there's no undo button. So you could update something back manually if you messed it up. But you always want to just make sure you're targeting what you mean to target before you hit enter on your update. All right, so it's your turn. We have a couple of pretty painless, I hope, update exercises. They should be pretty quick. So the first one here is to change Jackson's name to Jack. Once you've done that, you can move on to the next one, which is to change Ringo's breed to British Shorthair. And then finally, update both Maine Coon's ages to be 12. So there are two cats that have breed of Maine Coon. Make them both 12. Okay, so in the next video, we'll talk about answers. All right, so the first one is to change Jackson's name to Jack. So we'll practice what I just talked about, running a select before you do the update. So let's just try selecting star from cats where name equals Jackson. Okay, so we get Jackson, but we want to update his name to be Jack. So now we do our update, cats, set name equal to Jack. That's what we want to change it to. And where do we want to change it? We want to change it where name is currently Jackson. Now I didn't specify that you had to use where name equals Jackson. You could also say where cat ID is 7, or where breed is Sphinx, because we only have one Sphinx right now. So any of those are valid. Now if we do our select again, we get nothing because there is no cat named Jackson. If we change it to Jack, we get the same cat whose name is now Jack. Next up, change Ringo's breed to British Shorthair. So let's do the same thing where we just do a select where name is Ringo. You can see that currently breed is Shorthair, but we want to get more specific, British Shorthair. So to do that, we do an update, cats, set, breed equal to British Shorthair, like that, where name equals Ringo. And again, you could also do cat ID 1, or where breed is Shorthair. You could identify this cat however you'd like, but let's make sure it worked. So now if I select where name is Ringo, we see breed is now British Shorthair. So the last one, update both Maine Coons, so breed equal Maine Coon, and make their ages 12. So let's just take a look at our current setup in our database. You can see we have these two Maine Coons, Cindy and Dumbledore. Cindy is 10, Dumbledore is 11. For whatever reason, we want both of them to be 12. So let's just select both of them first. Select star from cats where breed equals Maine Coon. Just like that. Perfect. So we are targeting them correctly, so we can copy that. And then we'll do our update. Cats set age equal to 12. We don't need quotes. Where, and I'll just paste that in. And it updates both of them. So that's really what I was testing here, is that you understood that where is not always just going to return one result. Whatever is returned will always be updated, which is also important to note that if you leave that where off, and I just said update cats set age 12, that would update every cat, which we don't want to do, which is why it's always important to select things first and make sure you know what you're targeting. Sometimes there could be reasons you wanted to update everything in a table, like if you were making a big change, you are migrating something, or you realize that you made a big error early on in your application and you have every piece of data is wrong somehow, maybe. But most of the time, you're being very specific in the changes you're making. So just to double check, if we select again, you can see Cindy and Dumbledore are now both 12, and that's all you needed to do. Perfect. Next up, we're diving into delete. Okay, so we've made it through the C, R, and U portions of CRUD. Now we finally made it to D, which stands for delete or destroy, depending on who you ask. So in this video, we're going to see how to delete things in MySQL. And it's pretty straightforward. It's very similar to selecting things, except rather than just selecting something, you're going to delete it. So let me show you what I mean. Here's an example that will delete any cat with the name Egg in our database. So imagine, first of all, that we were selecting. All we would have is select from cats where name is equal to Egg. So if we ran that, it would give us the cat or cats with name Egg, and we can swap out select with delete, and that will delete it. So that same rule of thumb from before, where I said make sure before you update something that your selection is correct, then do the update, because it will, there's no undo button, unfortunately. Same holds true, and more so with delete, because your data's gone as soon as you delete it. So let's try this. We'll delete Egg. Let's do, first of all, select star from cats. Just make sure we have Egg in here. There he or she is. I'm not quite sure what I was intending with that name Egg. So what we'll do first is just make sure we can select appropriately before we delete. So select star from cats where name equals Egg. Remember that this is case insensitive. Just for now, I'll do lowercase just to prove that. All right, so we get Egg. Perfect. So now to remove Egg, delete from, and then we can just copy this. So before I hit enter, I do need to take a moment to address something pretty serious. And that is that no cats are being harmed, no cats are dying here. Yes, they're being deleted from this table, but in reality, deletion doesn't mean death. It means that they're being adopted, perhaps to a loving family that will treat them with the care that they deserve. So there's no death here, and I hope I don't receive any furious comments about how I'm treating animals in my course. I love animals. I learned from my first course, I made a mistake. I will never refer to deleting dogs or cats as killing them. I'm very sorry for that. So again, these cats are not dying. So with that out of the way, let's hit enter. Now let's go back and select star from cats. And as you can see, Egg is now gone. Also, something that does come up sometimes, notice that the cat IDs have not shifted. They're still the same. Some of my students in the past have had the expectation that the IDs would alter, but they always will stay the same. And that's because when something is inserted into a table, that unique ID is generated for it. Remember, it's a primary key. And eventually, we'll learn about having multiple tables that interact with one another, and we'll be storing these IDs in other tables. So if it changed, that could be problematic because we'd have to change it in multiple places. Anyways, all I'm trying to say is that we removed 4, but we still have 5, 6, and 7. This didn't change to 4, this didn't change to 5, and so on. All right, so we deleted that. Rest in peace. Enjoy your new life with your happy family egg. So one last thing here is that if you look at what I've written here, delete from cats, what do you think that will do? Now, I don't run it, but what do you think this would do? And the answer is that it deletes everything, all cats. They're all released to their happy families. So that's important to know that you can do that. So it's different than dropping a table, because dropping a table gets rid of the table entirely and all data inside of it. But deleting from cats just deletes the entries in the cats table, but we still have the shell. We still have the cats table. There shouldn't be very many times when you need to use this command. I'm not going to do it just yet because I want us to have our cats data for a little bit for the next exercises, but just keep that in mind. Because we didn't specify a where clause over here, it's the same as selecting without a where clause. It selects everything, so this will delete everything. Okay, next up, you're going to practice deleting. All right, so it's your turn here. We're going to get some practice with delete. So we have 3 different things I'd like you to do. The first one is to delete all cats that are 4 years old. So if we look at our data, there's only 1 right now because we got rid of egg. But I would like you, so don't just say delete Ringo or where breed is British Shorthair or ID is 1, but use age. Then the next is to delete cats whose age is the same as their cat ID. Now I had you do something similar to this with the select exercises. Now you'll need to put that together with delete. So in our case, it's only Jack at this point. So Jack has an ID of 7 and age of 7. But once again, no cheating. Don't just select based off of name or breed. Do it the way I specified, please. It's up to you, but the way I recommend. Next up is to, delete all cats. So that thing that I said I wasn't going to do because I didn't want to delete all of our data, well, you're going to do it. And then we'll be starting with a whole bunch of new data in the next exercise. All right, give it a shot. So let's talk about solutions to these. The first one, to delete all 4-year-old cats, all we need to do is start off, and you don't have to do this, but I like to start off by making sure we're selecting things correctly. So select star from cats where age equals 4. We get Ringo. Then I just like to copy this and do a delete from cats. And of course I forgot to add a space, but delete from cats where age is 4. Now, if we do let's do our first select, we should see nothing. And if we do a select star, we should see that we're now missing number 1, who was Ringo, by Ringo. Okay, next up, delete cats whose age is the same as their cat ID. So this one involved something slightly different, like I mentioned, where we're not just checking for a specific piece of data like breed equals Maine Coon or age equals 12, but we're checking where cat ID equals age. So we'll do a select first, select star from cats where cat ID equals age, or you could do age equals cat ID. And we get Jack. Cat ID is 7, age is 7. Great. So then we'll just copy this and do our delete from cats where cat ID equals age. It says 1 row affected. If we try and select it again, it's gone. And if we do a select star, now we're also missing Jack. You can see we just have 2, 3, 5, and 6, which leads us to our final example. Delete all cats. So this one is pretty straightforward. If we tried to do the equivalent select, it would just be select star from cats with no ensuing where clause. Just like that. So to delete all of those, well, it's just delete from cats. All of our cats are being released at once into a land of rainbows and joy. We hit enter here. They're definitely 100% not dying. Nothing bad will ever happen to them. Here we go. 4 rows affected. Select star from cats, the moment of truth. And they're all gone and not dead. Okay, so we've now covered the C and the R and the U and the D in CRUD. That spells CRUD, which means that we're done with this. Next up, you'll get some practice putting it all together. Hey, welcome to the next section. So this section is a bit different than everything else. I guess you could say that for every section, hopefully, but the structure is pretty different because it's all challenges, it's all exercises. So the way that this will work is you're going to practice all the commands you've seen up until this point. Everything from creating a database and switching and using the database to creating your tables and defining a schema, to then doing the basic CRUD operations we've talked about, creating, reading, updating, and deleting data. All that stuff, all those commands that are associated with that, you'll be practicing them all at once in this section. And it's not just one giant video. I broke it up into kind of logical, hopefully, sections that make sense. You'll go through, the create section. We'll create data together, and then you'll do exercises with it. And we'll be working with all the same data, so we get all the same answers, which is really important that, if you're following along and you're trying to update something, that your update looks the same as mine. So the data that we'll be working with has to do with inventory management, has to do with, let's say, a clothing company, an online clothing retailer, or maybe just our closet. We're just doing an inventory of my closet. I need to figure out what fits, what doesn't fit, what colors are there, what shirts have holes, I don't know, what to give away to charity, what to burn in a pile, if that's what you do, all that stuff. And, we'll have different types of shirts. I got props again, short sleeves, we've got long sleeves, and the underappreciated and elusive 3/4 length sleeve. Not to mention things like, Hawaiian shirts, or even Hawaiian shirts of different colors too. I bet you didn't see that coming. Look at that, another Hawaiian shirt. Yeah, I should probably stop this video, huh? So let's get on with the exercises. Coming up, whole bunch of exercises around shirts. All right, so we've seen the basic components of CRUD, creating, reading, updating, and deleting. You've learned how to do all those operations in SQL. And now it's time for the super, ultra, hyper, mega CRUD exercise. Actually, let me try that one more time. It's time for the super, ultra, hyper, mega CRUD exercise. It's only been half a second, but I already regret that. So let's move on. So the idea here is that you're going to get to put all the different things you've learned to use. So this will be one exercise. In this case, we're working on closet inventory. Super exciting, I know. So basically the idea is that I or you or somebody has a bunch of clothing in their closet that they want to go through an inventory and figure out sizes and colors. And we're just focusing on shirts, so different types of shirts, tank tops, polo shirts, t-shirts, and so on. And we can go through and we'll just perform some basic operations on them. I do want to add a note that I know that up until now our data has been sort of trivial, and this included t-shirts. It's not that exciting or that realistic, really, but we still don't have the pieces to go into complex real-world data that you would see in a web app. But we will get there, and so hold tight. I promise we'll be seeing a lot of real-world, potentially more exciting, definitely more challenging data. So we're working with spring cleaning, and you're going to have a bunch of operations to do. And the first one is to create a brand new database. So think back to how we did that. No more working in the cats database. We need a new one called shirtsDB. So create that. And then the next step is to create a new table called shirts. And to do that, you need a little more information. You need to know, what does that table look like? So here you go. Here's a graphic representation. We've got a shirt ID, which cannot be null and is a primary key. We have article, which should be something like t-shirt or polo shirt or tank top. It's text. Then we have the color of the shirt, which is also text. White, green, black, blue, and so on. We have the shirt size, in this case, smalls and mediums, text. And then we have actually, before I move on, I do want to call your attention to the fact that I did shirt_size rather than just size. And that's because size is a bit of a reserved word. So you can still use it, but it's a word that MySQL uses internally, size. And so it's better to avoid any conflicts there. So I just went with shirt size. And then last worn is a number, and that refers to roughly how many days ago the shirt was last worn. So the idea is that we would inventory our closet. Maybe you do this, maybe you don't, but you go through and you figure out what you don't wear all that often, and then either sell it or donate it or I don't know, make tie-dye with it, whatever you do. So that's what we're trying to calculate, or what we're trying to store here. And it's just a number for now. So create that table. It should be called shirts. And once you do that, you can move on to the next step, which is getting the starter data in there. So I want all this data in the table, but I don't want you to have to type it up yourself. It can be obnoxious to insert that manually. So I've given you basically a starter seed data that contains the exact same thing. So a white t-shirt that's small with 10 days ago. So you can see it's the same as this first shirt here. And I've done it for all 8. So you could copy this. It's in the text of this video as well. And then what you could do is just insert it all at once. So remember how to do a multi-insert. Get all that data in there with a single line. And then the next step is to add a single new shirt. So insert something manually, not using a multi-insert, but just one at a time. A purple polo shirt that's medium, that was last worn 50 days ago. All right. So then once we have those 9 shirts in there, we can now start to do some stuff with them. First thing we'll do is select all shirts, but only print out article and color. So we should only see t-shirt purple, polo shirt black. We don't want to see ID, we don't want to see size or last worn. Then once you do that, the next step is to select all medium shirts. So all shirts that have size of medium, and print out everything but the shirt ID. So we want all of this here, article, color, shirt size, last worn, but not this, but only for the mediums. Okay, then next up, we're moving on to update. So we've done the create and the read. We're working on update now, which is update all polo shirts to be size large. Maybe, I don't know, you realize that the company that makes your polo shirts, it might say medium on them, but in reality, they're pretty large. And so you want to update your database. It's a dumb story. Let's just go with it. So change their size to large. So that's where article equals polo shirt. Next up, update the shirt that was last worn 15 days ago and change last worn to 0. So this would mean there's a shirt that was worn 15 days ago that we decided to wear today. So we're going to change the database to say last worn is now 0. So once you do that, now our final update, we had a bit of a mishap. We were doing laundry. We took all the white shirts and we washed them with, I don't know, some colored stuff that we shouldn't have. And we shrank them at the same time. So we have a double update here. You need to update all the white shirts to now be an extra small size. And their color is no longer white, but it should be off-white. So you need to update both of those at once with one line, just to be clear. All right. Next, we're deleting. So delete all old shirts. And in our case, old just means if it was worn 200 days ago or last worn 200 days ago. We will see very shortly how you can do things like delete all old shirts that have been last worn greater than 50 days ago. But for now, we're doing exactly 200 days. Okay, next up, our tastes have changed. We've decided we no longer like wearing tank tops. We don't like the person that it turns us into. So we're going to delete all tank tops from our database. So delete all shirts where article is tank top. Then finally, catastrophe strikes. We have to delete all shirts. I'll let you decide why, but we need to delete all the shirts. That doesn't mean delete the table or the database. Just delete the shirts in the table, so it should be an empty table. Then finally, drop the entire shirts table, another catastrophe. So it should be an empty table at this point. Drop it entirely. And that's it. So go through all those steps. I recommend just pausing the video as you go. Make sure you do them. And then, if you'd like, watch the solution to see how to do it or how I did it. Okay. Alrighty, let's go through the solution. Spring cleaning, we're doing our closet inventory. And the first step was to create a brand new database called ShirtsDB. So if we hop over to Cloud9, if we just check what database we're using, remember we can do select database. We're using cat app. So we're going to make a new database, create database, and we wanted to call it shirts_db, semicolon. Now, if we do show databases, you can see we have shirts DB down at the bottom. All right, so the next step, we need to use shirts DB, just like that. And now if we run that same select database line, we're currently using shirts DB. Okay, so now this is probably the longest thing you'll have to type. We need to create a new table. We'll call it shirts, and it needs to have these 5 columns. Shirt ID, which cannot be null and is a primary key, which means that we'll have it auto increment as well. Article, which should be varchar, and let's just for simplicity say all of these have a 100 character limit. Color, varchar 100. Shirt size, yes, we could have kept it short, but maybe you might have a shirt size that's small, spelled out the full word rather than just the letter S. So we're not going to limit that either for now. And then last worn is an int. So let's try it. We'll do a create table shirts. And I'm going to do this on new line here. And the first thing that we have, let's start with shirt ID, which should be an integer, not null, auto increment. Next, we're going to move on to article, which is a varchar 100. And then after that, we have color, which is also varchar 100. Then we have shirt size, which is also varchar 100. And finally, we have last worn, which is an int. Just like that. Then we'll close our parenthesis, and then we'll add our semicolon. And I forgot something, which I did not do on purpose. But if we look at the message, it says incorrect table definition. There can be only one auto column, and it must be defined as a key. And so I'm missing the primary key definition at the end, which this is actually a helpful error. Oftentimes these error messages aren't that useful, but this one tells us exactly what we did wrong. So I'm going to recall that line. And then at the end, I'm going to add comma, primary key. And then our primary key is shirt ID, just like that. Now if I hit enter, and would you look at that, I left off the last parenthesis again. So we have another error. Okay, so now if we hit enter here, it worked. If you'd like to see a nice cleaned up version of what this actually looks like here, I have it here. So create table shirts, shirt ID, int, not null, auto increment, article varchar, color varchar, shirt size varchar, last worn int, primary key, shirt ID, and the semicolon and the correct parenthesis closing it out, and that should do it. All right, and if we wanted to double check that things worked, we can do our describe shirts, and you can see we have what we expect. So the next thing is to get all of this data in our database. So I gave it to you as this comma separated list where things are all in the same format, where we have parentheses for one shirt, and then inside of that we have article first, and then color, and then size, and then last worn. So we can insert using that format. So we'll do an insert into shirts, and we have to specify we're doing article first, then we're doing color, then we're doing shirt size, and then finally we're doing last worn. And then we need our values, and I'm just going to hit enter for now, and I'm going to paste that giant list, and we need a semicolon at the end, and we hit enter. Good, no mistakes this time. It says records 8 rows affected. Okay, so if we wanted just to double check, we can do our select star from shirts, and we get the data in there that we should have. And then the last thing we need to do is to add a new shirt. So manually, one shirt rather than bulk inserting. It should be a purple polo shirt that's medium that was last worn 50 days ago. So I didn't specify what order you need it to insert into, so I don't really care, but we'll do insert into shirts, and we'll do color because that's how I specified here. Color, then article, then size, and then last worn. So color, article, shirt size, last worn. Like that. Values, and it's purple, polo shirt, comma, medium, comma, 50. Just like that. Okay, and if we do select star, we should see that new polo shirt down there. It's purple, medium, 50 days ago we wore it. All right, so we've now wrapped up the create part of CRUD. We saw how to create the database. We created a new table. We inserted data into the table. Now we're moving on to reading. So this is the read solution. Basically, it's a bunch of select statements we're going to write. So the first one is to select all shirts, but only print out their article and their color. So back in Cloud 9, all we need to do is select, and rather than just select star, which gives us everything from all shirts, I mean, this is correct in that we want all shirts to be listed, but we wanted to narrow down the fields we get, which was article, comma, color. And there we go. Article color, t-shirt white, polo shirt black, tank top white, and so on. Next up, select all medium shirts, but only print out shirt ID. So that's all we want. So let's start off by just getting the medium shirts. So select star from shirts, where, and then we need to do a shirt size equals medium, just like that. And we'll hit enter. And we get 4 shirts that have shirt size of medium, but all that we want is everything excluding the shirt ID. Just a moment ago, I think I said it backwards. We want everything but the shirt ID, which means we need to list everything we want out. So select article, color, comma, shirt size, comma, last worn, and then we can just copy this from shirts where shirt size equals medium. And here we go. We have all mediums, and we have the 4 columns we're looking for, which excluded shirt ID. Shirt ID. So that's it for the selecting portion, the read in our CRUD. Next up, update. So we've covered creating and reading. Now we're on to updating our shirts. So the first problem is to update all polo shirts and change their size to be large. So we'll start by just selecting polo shirts. Select star from shirts where article equals polo shirt, just like that. Okay, so this is what we get. And what we want to do is change shirt size to be large. So we need to keep this. I'll copy it now. And then we'll type out update shirts set, and we want to change shirt size to now be large. And where do we want to do that? Only where article is polo shirt. Hit enter. We get 3 rows affected, 3 rows changed. Now, if we go back and run our same select, we should see all polo shirts are now larges. We could do the same thing just to see it in the grand scheme of things. There we go. We have 3 larges now, all polo shirts. The next problem is to update the shirt last worn 15 days ago and change last worn to be 0. So we'll start by just selecting that shirt like we did earlier, where last worn equals 15. There it is, tank top, blue, medium, last worn 15 days ago. And we wore it today. It was a hot day, we needed a tank top, and we want to update last worn to be 0. So update shirts set last worn equal to 0, where last worn is currently 15. We get 1 row affected, 1 changed. Let's do our select again. We no longer have it, but now if we say select where last worn is 0, we have 2 shirts. This t-shirt that was already there and our blue tank top we just added. Perfect. So the final update is to update all white shirts, change their size to extra small, and at the same time, change their color to off-white. So this needs to happen all at once. You can't do 2 lines. I mean, you could, but that's against the rules for this problem. So let's start off by just selecting all white shirts. Select star from shirts where color equals white. Oh boy. Let's get rid of that extra L there. Here we go. So we have two shirts, a t-shirt that's white, that's small, and a tank top that's white, that's small. So we want to change color to be off-white and shirt size to be extra small because we shrank them and we mixed them with colored stuff in the washing machine. So their color is now off-white. So to do that, let's start with the first part, update shirts, and we'll set color to be off-white. And then we'll do the second part with a comma, shirt size equals XS, extra small, just like that. And then we'll do our where color currently equals white. And that should do it. Fingers crossed, no typos. Now, if we go back and select where color is white, we should have nothing. But if we say where color is off-white, we should have two that are extra smalls, or we could, of course, do select star from shirts to check our work. We have extra small, off-white, extra small, off-white. Okay, so that problem was just making sure that you could update multiple fields at once, making sure you understood that. Okay, that's it for update. Next, we move on to D, delete. Okay, so we've made it to the end, the final video solution to our spring cleaning extravaganza problem. Now we need to delete. We've covered creating, reading, and updating, basically inserting, selecting, and update. Now we're going to use delete. So the first thing is to delete all old shirts, which really just in this case means last worn is 200 exactly. So when we do our select star, you can see there's two shirts that meet that criteria. 7, ID of 7, and ID of 2. But we're going to delete them based off of last worn. So we always start with our select star from shirts where last worn equals 200. And we get our two shirts. So then we can copy this. And actually we can copy this entire thing. Delete from shirts where last worn is 200. 2 rows affected. Now, if we do a select star, those two are gone. You can see it goes from 1 to 3, and then from 6 to 8. And there we go. So the next problem is to delete all tank tops. We've decided tank tops make us look kind of stupid, so we're going to delete tank tops. So your tastes have changed. So how many tank tops do we have? We've got 1 and 2 that are left. So we'll do a select star from shirts where article equals tank top. We get 2. Then all we need to do now is delete from shirts where article equals tank top. Hit enter. Now if we try and select them, they're gone. And if we do a select star from shirts with no where clause, now we have 1, 3, 5, 6, 9. So we've lost our 2 tank tops. All we have are t-shirts and polo shirts, which leads us to our final exercise here. Delete all the shirts. And I lied, it's actually the second to last. So to delete all the shirts, but not the entire table, it's pretty simple. We use the same where clause, which is to say that we don't have a where clause. So in this case, it returns select star from shirts returns all shirts. Well, we just replace that, delete from shirts, if I can spell it correctly, with this part, and moment of truth. 5 rows affected. Now when we do select star from shirts, we get nothing. It's a sad day. Not as sad as when we deleted the cats, but still sad. And the last thing is to drop the entire shirts table. We're just done with this. We hated this exercise. We want to move on. So drop table shirts. Now hit enter. And if I do show tables, no tables. And if I try and describe shirts, we get an error because there is no shirts table to describe and it freaks out. So we've successfully deleted it. Now we have an empty database that we don't need anymore. And we're done with this. Congratulations. Hey, welcome to another one of these videos at the beginning of a section where I just make a fool of myself, do something ridiculous. This time, we're working with books. As you can see, I got more props. Just really love props on this course. And they're here for a reason, because in this section, we're getting introduced to our new data set. So for the next couple of sections, we're going to be working with one data set that I'm going to give you, and it has to do with books. And books make a particularly good data set because there's a lot of data to model. We've got things like, titles, genre, the authors, how many authors there are, things like reviews, ratings, page count, release dates, tons of information for all different sizes of books, giant prop books, medium, small books, all that fun stuff. And our backstory here, it's a very weak backstory, is that we run a small online bookstore and we're being just slaughtered by Amazon. So we're fighting back the only way we know how, which is redoing our database inventory management system. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to fight back by redoing our database, and that will be what we start this section doing. But then once we have that data in the database, we're going to move on to learning a bunch of new commands. And those commands all are called string functions. So I'll explain what those mean in just a little bit. I don't want to make this video too long, but basically they expand our way of selecting data and working with text or with strings. Really important and kind of fun things that we can do. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Before I forget, this book here, it's a very important book. This represents the book of SQL knowledge. Yeah, kind of regret this now, but this is the book of SQL knowledge. You can ignore, there's a bunch of bugs in here. They're attracted to the light. You can ignore that part. Our book of SQL knowledge doesn't have any bugs in it. We are bug free. Anyways, I think I should probably end it here. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so we made it through all of that crud. That's sort of a joke. Anyways, we're now talking about string functions. So basically, we've seen how to interact with our database, create stuff, insert it, update, delete, all of that. But now we're going to focus more on select, or reading the data out. Because what we've been doing right now is just reading the data directly as it is. So I could say, I select breed and name from cats, and that's it. I get it back, and that's great. But there are things that I could do with that data. So with numbers, I might want to add them together, or I might want to, reverse a string, or replace all spaces with a certain character, or conjoin first name and last name, or conjoin, two pieces of data together. All of these are different operations, different ways of printing our data out that we can do. And so we're going to start focusing on them in this section. We're talking about string functions. So there's going to be a bunch of things that we see. I already mentioned some of them. We can concatenate words. We can take certain parts of a string and leave other parts out. We can reverse. We can uppercase, lowercase, replace characters, all sorts of things. But before we get there, the first thing I want to do is show you something that I think is pretty useful and that we'll use pretty often from here on out. So up until this point, all of the SQL that we've been writing has been manually entered into the command line, into the CLI here. So if I want to create a table, I have to type create table and then the name of the table, cats. But let's say that I mess it up. So let's say I typed singular cat, which technically isn't a problem per se, but it's a good idea to have things pluralized. It won't break. So let's say I don't notice for a little bit though. So I create a table cat, and we want, name is varchar 100, age is 10. What am I doing? Age is int, just like that. Let's say we leave it at that. Now this isn't a great example because this is a short line, but if I messed it up, I have to go all the way back here and edit it, right? And do cats like this. But let's now suppose that I have something even longer and I want to put it on separate lines and format it nicely like this. Create table cats. And then we have parenthesis there, and we'll do name is varchar. And let's say I misspell this like that. And age is an int. And then I realized, oh shoot, I totally messed up. I don't have a way of getting back there. I don't have an easy way of getting here. So I have to retype the whole line or copy it. There's no simple way of editing it. So what I want to show you is that we can run code from a file. And that's really, really useful. Running SQL files. That's what we're going to talk about here. So basically, by the end, we will be working with files that look like this. They're nicely formatted. They have nice syntax highlighting. We can edit them, make changes, and so on, and run them when we're ready, rather than typing things manually into the command line. That doesn't mean that we won't be typing things here, because it's a very useful tool. Oh, go away, Siri. It's a very useful tool. I should probably edit that out. Well, anyways, it's a useful tool that allows us to explore things, try things out. If they're short lines, it's great. But if we're really trying to do more serious stuff, it's much easier and better to work in a file. You can make edits, you can share it with people. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead. Let me get out of this. And I'll just hit enter and get an error. And that's fine. So right now I'm in CATS database. And if I do show tables, I do have a CATS table, but if I look at it, it's empty. So what I'm actually going to do is drop that CATS table, drop table CATS. Okay. So what I want to do is remake the CATS table. And what I could do is what I just did here, create table CATS and do the whole thing. But rather than that, I'm going to do it in a file. And then all I'll have to do here is run that file. I'll execute it with one short line. So up here, I have a new file. Again, you can do file, new file. You can use the shortcut shown here. You can right click and do new file as well. Whatever we do though, we need a new file. And I'm just going to put something in there. So create table. And I am showing you creating a table, but we'll be putting any SQL query in here. Creating a table, dropping tables, inserting data, selecting any sort of query we want. So create table CATS. And it's so easy now to format it nicely. We'll have name, which is varchar 100. Let's do an ID as well. See how easy that was if I made a mistake. Cat ID will be an int, not null, auto, increment, comma, name, varchar, and then we'll do age is an int, and we'll do primary key is cat ID. So this should all be review. But what's nice is I have this query like this. I need to save the file. So I did Command S, but you can also go File Save. And we need to give it a name. Any name will do. I'll just call it first file. And this is the most important part, .sql. So that's what identifies the contents of the file as SQL code. So we need that. Click Save. Make sure it changed up there. Also, you can see we got nice syntax highlighting now, which is also very useful. Okay, so I'm sure by now you can see the value in doing this. You have a history of your work. You can edit it, share it with people. It's just a much better way of doing it. So how do we actually run it? Well, this is the magic. Source, and then a file name. So in our case, our file name is firstfile.sql. So we just need source filename.sql. So I'm going to actually quit out of the CLI. And the first thing I want to show you is that it matters where you are when you initialize your CLI. So when I type ls here, and if you're not familiar with that, it just lists the current files. So what this shows me is that I have book data, first file, and problems. All right, so we want first file. Don't worry about these other two. So we are in the correct directory to access that file. So if I start up the CLI with MySQL CTL space CLI, and I use the cat app database, just like that, I'll make some space. Now all I have to do is source first file.sql, just like that, and we'll see what happens. It says query OK. So now how do we know it works? Well, we could do describe cats, and here's our table. So that's all that there is to actually executing the file. It's just the source and the file name. But what I want to show you, two things. I'll go ahead and make a new directory. You don't have to do this, but I'm just going to call it, testing. And then inside of testing, I'll make a new file. And what I'll put inside of that file is a select statement. Select star from cats. Actually, let's do an insert. Insert into cats. And we'll just do, what do we have here? Name and age, which I'm just realizing I capitalized. So we could obviously go back and change that here and rerun it, but we'll leave it. So insert into cat's name and age, just like that. values, and name will be, let's do Charlie, and age will be, let's do an old cat, 17. Save the file, and we'll do file, save, and make sure the file has .sql in it. So we'll do rename, and I'll just call this insert.sql. Okay, let's actually, just to show you we can do more than one thing at a time, let's insert both, or let's insert two, and this one will be called, I think we already have a Cindy. Let's do a Connie, who is 10. And then at the end, we'll also do select star from cats, just like that. So these three things will be executed at once, if we do it correctly. So now to reference this file, our CLI is running in this folder. So we can't just say insert.sql. If we did that, source insert.sql, it tells us it can't find that file. So what we need to do is do a source testing/insert.sql. And there we go. So that's important, that you have to access the correct path. You have to refer to this file by its full path to get there. So if you're in this folder, all that we can access are these. But if we drill to this folder, then we have access. And obviously you could extrapolate that to as many layers as you need. So now let's make sure it worked. You can see after it worked, we had query OK, one row affected. That was our first insert. And then the same thing, our second insert, and then our select statement gave us this right here. So that's all there is to running code from a file. It's really, really useful. We'll be doing it pretty much nonstop. And the first thing that we're going to do is actually get some new data into our database using this in the next video. So now that we've seen how to use source, we're going to take advantage of it to get some sample data going for the next couple of videos and exercises. Cats are kind of boring. They're pretty simple at this point, name and age and breed. And we need some more complicated data, and that's something that's a little more real world. So we're still not working with something straight out of a production app because we haven't seen some of the features that we need to know for that to work. So it's still kind of simplified data, but what we're working with is books data. So this is what we have. I've given you this file, so you can find it in the file section or the downloadable section of this video. Basically, there's two parts. We're creating a books table, and I'll go over that in just a second. And then after that table is created, there's a bunch of values that I'd like for you to insert. And I didn't want you to have to type these all at once, but I want us to all have the same data so we can be on the same page when we run exercises. So all of this data is actually real data. It's about books from Amazon. And basically every book has a book ID, so that should not be new. There's a title, it's a varchar. Then we have an author first name and an author last name. So if we look at one, here's the namesake, that's a title. The author first name is Jumpa, and her last name is Lahiri. Then we have the released year. So what year was it released in? And this is an example where we're using kind of the, I don't want to say dumbed down, but simplified version of data. Because typically you would probably store a date, an actual date, not just a number like 2003. So we'll see how to do that once we talk about dates. But for now, we just have 2003. And then the next thing is stock quantity. And this is just an arbitrary number I picked. The idea here is that we have a fictional bookshop and we're keeping track of all the books and how many we have in stock. So for the namesake, we have 32 copies in stock. For a hologram for the king, we have 154 copies in stock. Then the final thing is the pages. How many pages are in that book? So you can see some books are really long, like The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, has 634 pages, and some are much shorter, like What We Talk About When We Talk About Love by Raymond Carver. Really good short stories if you like short stories. 176 pages. So a note about these books. I started off by just picking off the bestsellers on Amazon as of writing today. So I think that's where this one, Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, came from. But I then just decided to create a variety of years and page numbers, some of my favorite authors. It's a whole mix of things. So it is real world in a sense, but it's also I planned certain things to work certain ways. So we have we have some really long titles and some short titles. We have some really long books and short books. We have some books from the 2000s and some from the 1900s and so on. Basically, I wanted a variety of things that we could practice with. So go ahead, create a file in Cloud9 and put all of this in there. Now, if you want to type it, go ahead, but I would recommend that you don't, just so that you don't accidentally mess something up. We want our data to be consistent. So you go ahead, copy it, make a new file, and then we need to execute that file. And I want to make a new database. Right now, if we do select database, we're working with Cat App. I want to create database, and we'll call it Bookshop. And then use Bookshop, and we should have a blank slate. If we do show tables, there should be nothing here. Perfect. So what you want to do is make sure this file has been saved, and then we just execute it. So it's pretty straightforward. Source, and then you'll need to make sure you either are referencing the correct path. So in my case, I'm running my CLI in my root directory. So all I have to do is bookdata.sql. Whatever you called it, you'll need to refer to. I recommend just putting it in the main directory for now, but you could have a separate folder if you wanted to, and you just need to refer to it correctly. Anyways, source bookdata.sql. And here we go. All right, first thing, we get this message, and that tells us the create table worked. And then we get 16 rows affected, and that tells us the insert statement worked. So let's just verify. Let's do a describe books. Here we go. Here's all that we created in that table. And let's just do a simple select star from books. As you can see, it's pretty messy. And that's deliberate. We're going to work on ways, we're going to see ways of refining this and making things shorter, collapsing data, and so on. So that's all we're doing in this video, just getting set up. Now that we have it in there in our database, we'll be able to work with it and be on the same page. Awesome. All right, so we have that out of the way. We've seen how to run files using the source command, and then we actually did that with the sample data that I gave you. Now we actually dive into the meat of this section, which is all about string functions. And the first thing I want to show you is that if you go to Google and we type in MySQL string functions, whoops, string functions, excuse that, and we hit enter here, you can see I've already clicked on this link, the MySQL reference manual, string functions. I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of the documentation of MySQL. For one thing, I think it's kind of ugly and looks dated, but it does have all of the information you need. I just don't really like how it's presented. But if you look at this giant list here, these are all string functions that we can use. And a lot of them are very, very specific. I'm going to show you some of the more, first of all, the useful ones, and then a couple just fun ones, and that we'll be able to combine together for some good exercises. But we're not going to take a look at most of these. Most people don't even know that these are here. I'd say that's a generalization, but in my experience working with MySQL and people who work with MySQL, you use maybe 5 of these on a regular basis, and then occasionally you might need to do something like, hey, is there a way of doing X? Let me go check on the documentation, and oh, look, there is a way of doing that. Perfect. Or, oh no, there's not a way. Great. What am I going to do next? So I just want to show you that this is here. And the first one that we're actually going to take a look at is called concat. So what it will do is combine pieces of data, combine strings. So here's an example using this book data. Remember that we have author first name and author last name. And there are valid reasons for separating that data. Sometimes, you might want to sort books by last name, and sometimes you may only want the last name in certain contexts. You might not want the first name. It's not a great example, but there are reasons that you would separate this out. Just like when you're filling out a form online, you're signing up for a site, they usually don't just ask you for your full name. They ask you for your first and last name. But then, if they have those pieces of information, it's pretty easy to combine them. So that's what we're going to see now. How do we combine these two and get something that says Jhumpa Lahiri or Neil Gaiman, or in this case, Foster Wallace as the last name, which I'm actually not sure if that qualifies as a last name exactly, but David Foster Wallace, how do we combine that? How do we get that? And the answer is we use concat. So let me just first show you what we have right now. We'll do a select author, F name, author, L name from books. And that's what we get here, just what I had printed out in the slides. So what we want, again, is to combine them, but we'll take some baby steps. And yep, here's a slide. I totally got ahead of myself. What if I want full names? So concat. The way that concat works is that we pass in multiple arguments or pieces of data, and it will combine them. So whatever we give it, in this case, I mean, if you had columns named X, Y, and Z, this would work, but it's really just supposed to be an example. More specifically, what you can do are things like this. Concat a column name with another column. So that's what we'll work on. We're going to do first name or author F name and author L name and combine them together. And if we do this right here, so concat author F name, author L name, what it will actually do is just slam them together, put them exactly together, concatenate them. So there's no space in between. So we get Dave Eggers, Jhumpa Lahiri. So there's no, that's not exactly what we want. Maybe we want a comma. Maybe we want last name, comma, first name, or maybe we want first name, space, last name. So there's a way of doing that. When we concat, we can pass in a column name and then some other text and then another column name. And if we wanted more text, and we can keep going on and on and on, and it will concatenate everything. So to add a space, it's pretty simple. Author, first name, comma, and then a space, comma, author L name. And that will give us Dave Eggers and Jhumpa Lahiri. So now that I've shown you in the slides, let's take a look. And the first thing I'll show is that often people expect they can just come in here and just type concat. But if I just do concat, well, author F name, comma, author L name, there's a problem. Hopefully you can identify what the problem is. If I hit enter, this is not valid syntax. First of all, it doesn't know what table. What if we have multiple tables? Where's author F name coming from and author L name? And second of all, we have to select. So we can't just run these willy-nilly. We can't just run them on their own. We need to run them as a select. So select concat. And then in here, I'm actually going to start with something simple. I'm not going to use columns. I'm going to use text. So I'll just put something like hello, comma, world. So this is very trivial, but if I just do this, select concat hello world, and I hit enter, you can see it does it for me. And it just gives me hello world, combines these two things. So I could do the same thing and add a space. And rather than a space, let's do dots so it's easier to see. And we need a comma, a lot of punctuation going on. Select concat hello, comma, dot, 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 comma, world. It just shoves them all together and we get hello, dot, 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 world. So that's how we can do it with just text, which you probably won't be doing. You'll be doing things like this. Select, and then concat a column like author F name, and then a space, and then author L name from books. So let's try it. We can copy it now. Go over here and paste it. Select, and what it will do when we hit enter is just make a new column for us, or in our results. It doesn't change our initial data, just to be clear. Our data looks the same in the database. This is purely about printing it out. But we have this new thing up here with this horrible title, concat author F name, comma, space, comma, author L name. But then in here, we have the data that we're looking for. We have Jhumpa Lahiri, we have Patty Smith, Raymond Carver, and so on. So that's really useful to combine data like that. Now, if we want to get a little fancier, let's rename it. So let's give it an as, and we'll just say as full name, just like that. And now I get full name up here, Jhumpa Lahiri, Neil Gaiman, and so on. So that's concat. I'll show you a couple more examples just to show you how these string functions work. You don't have to just do one at a time. So we could do something like this. Select, and we'll do author first name just on its own, author F name as first name. Let's just do first actually, as first, comma, author L name as last, and then we'll have a concat author, and let's do it on a new line just because it gets a little messy here. Concat author F name, so this is what we've already seen, with a space, comma, author L name as, and we'll call it full. So we'll have three different things printed out. The first name under the title first, author L name as last, and then the full name combined using concat as full. So then we need to say from where? From books. And now I hit enter and I get this pretty little table. First, last, and full. So what I want to show is that you don't have to use it in isolation. You can combine it with other things. And we'll see this as we go. We're not going to just use concat. And you don't have to just use one concat per select. You could have multiple if we wanted to. I could have full name, and then I could have full names, comma separated instead. And if I want to do that, you can probably figure this out, but rather than just having a space there, I'll just put a comma. And now I get Jhumpa, comma, Lahiri. All right, so one more thing about concat is that there's something called concat WS, which stands for concat with separator. So there might be times where you're concatenating multiple fields, multiple things together with the same symbol or piece of data stuck in between them. So there's a shortcut for that. So if I wanted to have title dash author F name dash author last name, let's not debate why, but if I wanted to, I could do something like this. Select concat, and we have author, or actually we started with title, comma, and then we wanted to dash, and then author F name, comma, and then another dash, comma, author L name, just like that. So it's kind of a lot of repetitive typing, especially if we have more items that we're combining. But if I just do this here, from books, you see it does what you expect. It puts the title dash first dash last. But we can use concat WS, and it looks like this. So it switches things around a bit. The first thing that we pass in is what we want the separator to be. So in this case, a dash with a space on either side. And it will go ahead and then insert that in between every other thing we pass in. So we'll have title dash author, first name dash author last name. So now if I paste that in, you can see we get the same result, although I added spaces here, but it's the same idea. It's sandwiched every time. So just worth noting, if you ever are in a situation where you're combining lots of data in the same manner, you can use concat WS to save you typing this or whatever your symbol is over and over. So that's our first string function we saw, concat and concat WS. And what they do is concatenate or shove together, smash together strings. Next up in this onslaught of string functions is substring. So substring allows us to select individual parts or portions of a string. I only want the first character, I only want the middle 10 characters, or the last character, or so on. So the syntax is similar to concat. Here's an example. In this case, we're not working with columns or tables or anything. We're just working with static data, hello world. And what this will do, select, so there's our select again, and then substring, our string function. In parentheses, in this example, the first thing we do is tell it, here's the string we want to work with. So that first thing is hello world. And then what we're going to do is only print out the substring, the portion from 1 to 4. So those are indices referring to characters. And in MySQL, they start at 1. If you're familiar with other programming languages, they often start at 0. That's not the case here. So H is 1. So we go from 1 to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, which gives us hell. I'm sorry, that is a bad word. Please don't be mad at me. So hello world 1 to 4 gives us that, but that's not the only way of using it. Here's another example. Select substring hello world, the same starting piece of data. And this time, all we give it is one number, one index 7. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, space is 6, 7 is that W. You might think it's only going to give us that W, but that's not true. It gives us from that W on to the end. So if you only pass in one number rather than two, it starts from whatever that index is and just goes to the end. So let's try a couple out. We'll do a select substring, and we'll just do the hello world example that we just saw. And we'll go from 1 to 4. So we already know the answer here. Oh, there's hell. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, we get hell. So if we change that from, let's do 3 to 8, we get low whirl. So that's one way of using it. And then the next way, as we saw, is if we just leave that second or that third argument off and we just say hello world, comma 3, it will go from the third character, so 1, 2, 3, to the end. So we get low world. Or in the case that I showed, if we do 7, we get world. And there's one more way that we can use it, which is to actually give it a negative number, negative index. So what do you think will happen? I give it -3. Hello world. Well, the answer is that we get RLD. So it starts from the end of the string, and it goes from -1 to -2 to -3. And it includes all of them. So RLD, if we try that, give -3, you can see we get RLD. And if we did -7, it'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to this O. And we get O world. So that's how we do it with just static data. But now let's say we wanted to work with a column. So in our case, let's take the example of title. So let me just do a select star from, actually let's do select title from books. So we've got a variety of lengths of titles, right? Short ones like white noise, Coraline, long ones like what we talk about when we talk about love, stories. Let's say I wanted to just print out, I don't know, the first 10 characters of every title. Maybe, you've probably seen that before when you're on a shop, and if there's a long title, the whole thing isn't printed out. There's just, a couple words and then ... or read more or something like that you can click on. We'll do something similar. So to limit this, what we would do, let's just take this as an example. We can do a select substring. We'll give it the whole title, and then we only want from 0 to 10, or from 1 to 10, excuse me. We could do that. And this actually, here's another error that I considered editing out, but I've decided not to because it is worth taking a note of. The problem is that it thinks that I'm still in a quote because I have this opening quote and this closing quote, but in between I have another quote, which is actually an apostrophe in this case. So this is not going to work. If I do this, I'll just exit out, just ignore that. But I'll have to redo the whole line, and rather than using single quotes, I'll use double quotes, like this. Where I'm calling from, selected stories, just like that. All right, and then I'll get rid of this other quote I put at the end. So that is important just to take note of when we're working with strings. If you have a quotation mark in there, you've got to work around it. All right, so I do this, and you can see it gives me where I'm. Yes, this is 10 characters, maybe isn't long enough, but we're just going to work with that. So now to do it to every single title, it works just like we did with concat. We're going to do a select substring title, comma 1, comma 10 from books. And that's it. And there we go. Now we have this ugly heading up here, so we could do an as again. As, and let's just say short title, like that. Now we get this short title, blah, blah, blah. The name say Norse myth, American G. A hologram. Some of these actually work. The circle, there we go. Just kid. All right. So one other thing I'll show you. There is a shortcut. It's a very small shortcut, but you can type substr, S-U-B-S-T-R. I don't use this all that often because I can really remember what the shortcut is, because in some languages, there'll be substring where it's S-U-B-S-T. There's some I've seen where it's S-B-S-T. It's just not clear which characters get cut out, because it's not just all vowels, because we have a U still. Anyway, so if you would like, you can use this. I can just show you if you replace that. If we do select substring and just change substring to be substr, it does the same exact thing. But what I also want to show you is that we can combine concat and substring, or any of the string operators or the string functions you'll see. So let's say I wanted to add a ... after this, so that it looks like this. Short title, the name say ... Rather than just an abrupt cutoff, let's add a ... So hopefully you can identify what we need to do is first chop our string, use a substring, 1 to 10, and then concatenate that with ... So I'll do this in a separate file. I'll go ahead and make a new file, and I'll just call it something silly like bookcode.sql. So we know we're going to do a select, and there's going to be a concat in there. And what we're going to concat is the short title. So again, this is wrong, what I'm typing, but I just want to put a placeholder. The short title with a ... from books. So this won't do anything right now. We need to replace this with how we actually achieve that short title. And that's going to be with a substring. So in here, we type substring, and we want to put title in there, oops, comma, and we want it to go from 1 to 10. So this looks like a lot. It's pretty ugly. To format it a little nicer, we can do this. Depends on how intense you want to be about it. I like to just do it like this here. So substring is our first argument, comma, ... is our second one, from books. So if you look at it, you can see the order things are going to happen. So substring is going to happen first for every title. So that will be the name say, or American G. And that will be concatenated with ... And that will run for every single book in our database from books. So if we save that, we could either source the file or just copy and paste it. So let's do that now. We'll do source book code.sql. And there we go. The names say ... Norris Smith ... American G ... But you see we get this really hideous title up here. So let's put in as. We'll call it as short title. Save again, rerun it. Now we get this. Much, much nicer. Short title, the names say ... and so on. All right, so that's what all there is to substring. But the tricky thing, in my opinion, is just knowing that you can combine them. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but again, the way it works is whatever is on the inside first will be evaluated. So substring will happen first, and then that will be concatenated with this. So that's it. We have a couple more, and then we'll do some challenges. The next built-in string function that we'll work with is called replace. And what it does is it replaces parts of a string. So if you wanted to get rid of a certain occurrence of a character, or you wanted to replace all spaces with commas or something like that, you could use replace. And the syntax looks like this. Here's an example where we have the string hello world. And you know what? I just realized this again. That's a bad word right there. So if we wanted to get rid of that, we could use replace hello world, comma, what we're trying to remove, and then what we want to replace it with. And it will do that to all occurrences. In this case, hell only occurs once. So that's what our output looks like. Percent star octothorpe. Oh, what's this thing called? There's an actual name for it. The @ symbol, but there's a real name. And then O world. So if I copy that over and just run it now, you can see that's the output that we get. We could also do something like replace hello world And let's just replace all L's with 7s. Why not? And that's what we need to do there. And then we get hello world, but with 7s instead of L's. We could do the same thing, just to show you one more, with O's and replace them with 0. Now, one thing that is important to pay attention to, let's say I have hello here with a capital O and hello here with a lowercase o. Or excuse me, world with lowercase. So the idea is just I have upper and lowercase O's in here. If I try and replace O, and let's say I just want to replace it with, let's do an asterisk. What do you think will happen? And the answer is it only replaces exactly this character. So it is case sensitive. So it didn't touch this capital O here. So that's one way to use replace. The other way that I mentioned is that it can replace multiple things. So here's a silly example where I have a string cheese, space bread, space coffee, space milk. Maybe it's a grocery list or something. And I want to replace all spaces with the string and, space and space. Basically, the output will be cheese and bread and coffee and milk. It inserted that right there, here, here, and here, every time there's a space. So if I try running that, you can see it works. Cheese and bread and coffee and milk. So now let's do something with the book data we have. We'll do something really simple and similar to what we just did. Let's replace all E's with 3's. And we'll just do lowercase e. So anytime there's a lowercase e, like namesake, Norse, American, we'll replace it with a 3. So to do that is a select, replace, and don't ask why. It's not really a real world example, but select, replace, we want to do title. And then what are we trying to replace? Lowercase e's. What do we want to replace them with? 3. And then what table? From books. And we could get more specific, but let's just do from books. And you can see we get the namesake with 3 3's and all the way down. Consider the lobster, cannery row, and so on. And that's pretty much it to using replace. A bit of a bonus at the end here is that I'll show you we can combine replace with other functions like we've already seen. We use concat and substring together. So we could try the same thing by using replace and concat, for instance. So I could do something like, if I work in this book code, I will comment this out, which I haven't shown how to do yet, highlight it, and on a Mac it's command /. On a PC I believe it is control /. So I'm going to comment it out, which means it just won't run. It's here so I can see it, but SQL treats it, or MySQL treats it as if there's nothing there when it runs it. So what I want to do now, I want to combine replace. So what I'm going to do is select, and I'm just going to fill in some rough blanks here. So we have replace, and then we're going to have from books. But what we want to do is not just replace things. I'll do the same thing where we replace all E's with 3's. So that's replace title, the lowercase e with 3, like that. But I'm only going to take the first 10 characters like we did with substring. So I need to do substring, and I want to do substring of this whole thing. And I'm realizing as this goes on, this is a little convoluted, so I'll throw up another don't panic here. This is more just me showing you that it's something you can do, but it's not essential that you wrap your head around this entirely. But just to show you, so substring, and the first argument is replace this whole thing. So basically, we're taking a substring of this and then of this, and we want to go from 1 to 10. So that's a lot there. And now, if I paste it in here, you can see what it did was first replace all E's with 3, and then take the substring of that from 1 to 10. And of course, we could give it a better name because it is pretty ugly. So we could do as weird string, let's say. And now we have weird string up here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to show that we could combine them together. Why you would do this exactly, again, you probably wouldn't. But the key here is that they're kind of like Lego pieces. You can reorder them. You can, maybe more like nesting dolls actually, where you can nest them inside of one another. So like we did substring inside of a concat, we can do a replace inside of substring. So that's enough of replace. We're going to continue with a couple more, and then we'll do some challenges. All right, moving along to the next function, which is reverse. And reverse does what it sounds like. It reverses strings. That's why I said it's super straightforward. Forward, reverse, it's a joke. Yep. So that's what it does. It will reverse a string. So here's an example. Select reverse of hello world, and we get this. Ole. I think it's probably best if I just stop pronouncing them from here on out. But you get the reversed version of the string. Same casing and everything, same spaces, just reversed. And that's kind of all there is to it, to be honest. I'll show you a couple examples, but if you feel like you already have it, that was enough for you and you understand how it works, then feel free to just move on. But I'll go over to Cloud9 and show a couple of examples. So let's do a select reverse, and instead of hello world, let's just do meow, meow. Why not? Just like that. And we get what? Oh, I said I wouldn't pronounce them. Well, we get this right here, reversed of meow, meow. So we could do the same thing to find the reverse of every author's first name in our table, for instance. So that would be a select reverse author F name, and then from books. And there we go. We get the reverse of Jumpa, the reverse of Neil, and so on. And that's kind of it. And just like some of these other ones, we can combine them. So if I wanted to turn something into a palindrome, for instance, let's say I started with the string woof. And if you're not familiar, a palindrome is something that reads the same forwards and backwards. So the way I would do that is by adding FOOW to that and concatenating them. So taking the original string plus the reversed string and concatenating them. So we have two functions. We've seen how to do that. And it's just a matter of concat. So a select concat. And we'll just start with woof. And then what do we want to concatenate it with? Well, we want to concatenate it with the reverse of woof. Just like that. And that should do it. Let's try it out. And we get this, the palindrome version, I guess, that we just made, this sandwich. Now let's just try it with authors' first names again. So let's do that now. All we need to do is replace a couple things in here. So rather than concatenating woof, we're going to do author F name. And then we're going to use the reverse of author F name as well. Just like that. And then, of course, we need to say from where? From books. Let's copy that. So just again, we're taking the author's first name, the reverse of the author's first name, and we're smashing them together with concat. And there we go. We get, this one's kind of funny, I guess, David, Diva, D. And I don't think any of them are really pronounceable otherwise. But they are valid palindromes. So I guess we succeeded at something. The next function we'll take a look at is pretty quick as well. It's called char length. And what it does is it just tells you how many characters are in a given string. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So it looks like this, char underscore length. And when we do it on hello world, we could count the characters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the space, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And we get 11. At least my slide says we get 11. Let's verify that. Can't trust those slides. Whoever made them. Me. So you can see we get 11. So if we changed it and just added a bunch of stuff, we won't count it. But it says that's 31 characters long. Okay. So we could do something like select And let's just print out the author last name this time. So author L name, comma, then we'll also side by side print the character length of the author's last name. So it might say something like Carver, and then next to that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters. And Eggers, also 6 characters, and so on. So it's just going to be our author's last name followed by the number of characters in their name. So character char length, author L name, just like that. And let's put an as here, and we'll just call it length, just like that, from books. We'll hit enter, and you can see we get this nice little table with our author's last name and the corresponding length. So we've got a lot of authors who are 6 characters long, or their last name is 6 characters long. And then, we get Smith, who's the shortest, and so on. We'll see later on how we could sort things and order them differently. But for now, we've got them all here. All right. So just like before, if you feel like you have a grasp of this, feel free to move on. I'm just going to show that we can also combine character length. So what I would like to do is end up with a result that looks something like this. Eggers is, and then 6 characters long. So I'd like that for every author that we have. So if we break it down, this is going to be author's last name concatenated with is, concatenated with the character length, concatenated with characters long. So it's going to be kind of a big one. So let's try it out. We're going to do a select concat, and the first thing we'll concatenate is the author's last name. So author L name, and then we're going to concatenate that with space is space. So that gives us this right here. Then inside of that, we're going to add char length of author L name. You can see this is getting kind of long, comma, space, characters long, and our parentheses. So that's kind of a lot here. We're concatenating the first thing, the author's name, and then adding is, and then adding the character length, and then adding characters long. So we're building this sentence one piece at a time. And then we also need to specify from books. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's copy this, paste it in, and there we go. Lahiri is 6 characters long. Carver is 6 characters. Steinbeck is 9 characters. Foster Wallace is 14 characters. So that's working. By now, you should know we can use as to make this a little prettier. The only other thing that I'll take a moment to address is that this is kind of ugly. It's something that I do often to format my SQL, meaning my personal SQL, not MySQL, the database, is use one of these formatters. So there's a couple of them. I like this one, sql-format.com. And I can paste in my query and just click format. And it will just format it a little nicer for me. And it depends on, when things get really long, when we have long create tables, it will clean things up nicely for you. So in this case, this is the cleaned up version. Not that much of a difference, to be honest. But we can replace it anyways. It's a little easier to read. All right. So that's all there is to character length. That's all there is to char length. All right, welcome back. So we've made it through a lot of string functions. We've seen concat and replace and substring and reverse and char at. We have 2 more that I'm combining into one video because they're really simple and straightforward, and they're a natural pair. And then after we finish this, we have some fun exercises. So the 2 that we're looking at are upper and lower. And they do what they sound like. They change the case of a string. So we can make something all caps or all lowercase letters. So let's take a look. What do you think this will do? By now, you should be familiar with this select and then some string function. So select upper hello world is going to convert hello world to all caps. And just to prove that, let's go over here and do it. And we get hello world in all caps. Likewise, select lower hello world will convert everything to be lowercase. So it's really just the H and the W. And we get hello world. Still don't believe me? Okay, there we go. Hello world. So honestly, that's pretty much it. Just like the other couple videos before this, if you feel like that's good enough, go ahead, move on to the exercise. But if you want to see me use it with some of our author data, stick around. So let's do something silly like print out all book titles in all caps. So to do that, it's just select upper title from books. And that's it. And of course, we can combine it with other things. So we could do something like my favorite book is, as if someone was yelling. My favorite book is, and then a book name, like the namesake. And to do that, we need to combine the uppercase version. So I'll start writing it here, upper title. And we need to concatenate that with this string right here. And to concatenate them, kind of building backwards here, we need to use concat. Just like that. So concat, my favorite book is, and we should add a space, and then the uppercase version of title. And then we'll just add a select concat from books. So I kind of built that one in a different way, starting from the inside out. But you can see we get my favorite book is a namesake. My favorite book is a circle. My favorite book is the Cannery Row. Yeah, I'm not sure why I put the there. Whoops. Well, anyways, if we delete that extra the and rerun this, now it's grammatically correct. So that's pretty much it to upper and lower. I mean, we could change this to be lower fine, if you make me, I'll show it. I don't think there's any surprise about what will happen, but just in case, it just converts everything to lowercase. Okay, so that's upper and lower. That was a lot of stuff, all these different string functions we saw. Now it's time for you to get some practice doing it yourself. Okay, so you made it to the end, hopefully. I mean, I guess you could have skipped forward, but you made it to this video, however you got here, at the end of the string function section. So we have a couple of exercises, and they range from pretty straightforward to reasonably complex, where we combine multiple string functions together. So let's get started. The first one here is to reverse and uppercase the following sentence. Why does my cat look at me with such hatred? I would also appreciate an answer to that, if anyone can help me. But anyways, what we need to do is just take this, you can copy it or type it out, and just use MySQL. I should specify, don't just manually reverse it and type it uppercase. I mean, using what you just learned, how can you reverse and uppercase this? All right. Then, when you're done with that, the next problem. This one's a little different. You don't have to actually do anything. I want you to figure out what this prints out. So don't just cheat and copy and paste it. You can do that to check your work, of course, but try and work through what's actually happening. We've got a select, we've got a replace, and a concat, and some words and spaces and symbols and dashes. So give it a shot. Then move on to the next one here, which is to replace all the spaces in book titles with this little arrow. It's a dash greater than sign. So replace every space. So instead of the space namesake, it's the dash, or let's just say arrow, the arrow namesake, and that happens for every space. And one more thing I'll call attention to is up here, it just says title. So you're going to need to use as to make sure it says title. So basically your task is to just get this same data printed out, this exact same format. Then after that, print this out. So you're going to have the author's last name printed regularly forwards, and then next to it, you'll have the same author's name printed backwards, in reverse, you might say. So that's what you need to do. Also pay attention, up here it says forwards and backwards, so you'll need to use as again to do that. Then once you do that, the next one, I'd like you to print out a full author's name. So it's a little more complicated in caps. So we want Jhumpa Lahiri, so that's author first name and last name combined, and uppercased. And that should happen for every author. And then also, again, the name appears, or the header says full name in caps. All right, then make this happen. So what this is showing is a title, the namesake, and then was released in, and then the actual date that we have stored in our database for when it was released. So you need to combine a title, was released in, and then the year it was released. And again, I called it blurb, but just put some label up there. Then next one here, print book titles and the length of each title, which is pretty similar to what I did using authors' last names. So just print the title and then the number of characters in that title. As you can see, some of them are quite long. The only other thing I would say is up here, pay attention, we have character count. So use as, you get it by now. Then finally, this one combines 3 different pieces of data. We'd like to have a shortened title. So I believe this is 10 characters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, so the first 10 characters and then a ... afterwards and call that short title. Then we'll have the author printed out, but the way it should be printed is last name followed by a comma followed by first name. And then quantity. So quantity should not just be the number we have in stock, but it should be the sentence, 12 in stock or 104 in stock. So there's a lot of pieces here, and each one of these 3 is going to require multiple string functions to make it work. So give it a shot. This one is a little more challenging, so don't panic again if you don't get it, but try them all out. And then in the next video, we'll have solutions. Okay, let's go through some of these solutions. So the first one, reverse in uppercase this following sentence. Why does my cat look at me with such hatred? So I'm just going to copy it. And the first thing I'm actually going to do is make a new file. So I'll come up here and do new file, and I'll just call this exercises.sql. Then in there, I'll paste this. And we know that we need to do 2 things. We need to reverse it in uppercase. The order doesn't really matter. So we need to do a select first, either way. Select reverse, and we're going to select the reverse of this. And then we can do upper here, just like that. Or we could switch them and do select upper reverse. But let's give it a shot. And I'm missing my quote there. Let's get out of here. Missing that closing quote. There we go. Try it again. And there we go. It's reversed and all uppercase. So now I'm going to comment that out, and we'll move on to the next one. What does this print out? So let's start on the inside. Concatenate I with space with like space and cats. So it will be I like cats, the sentence with spaces. But then we have a replace, and replace is going to get rid of all those spaces and put dashes. So it should be I dash like dash cats. Let's try it. There we go. I like cats with dashes. So that one is really just testing that you understand how these are actually executed and that you can stack or nest multiple functions. Next up, we have our first one really working with the books data. So replace all spaces in book titles with the arrow. So we need to do a select, and we know that there's going to be a replace, and we know that it's going to be from books. So let's start with that. So what are we replacing? Well, we're looking for all titles, and we're replacing a space with the arrow. Double check, replace spaces with arrows, that should be good. And the other thing was that up here we had title. So we need to use as title. So let's copy it, make sure it works. There we go. Title, the arrow namesake, Norse arrow mythology, and so on. I'll comment that one out. And we'll move on to the next one. Print this out. So we should have forwards and backwards. And this is last name printed regularly. And this is last name reversed. So let's start. We know we need to have a select. And the first thing that we know is that we're going to have author L name as forwards. Just make sure I have that. So that will give us this right here. And let's close off. Let's do from books, just like that. So we could start with this if we wanted. And we get that left portion. Now we need this right portion. So we need a comma because we're now selecting two different things. And what we want to do here is use reverse author L name as backwards, just like that. Let's copy it. And there we go. Forwards, backwards, regular last name, reversed last name. All right, comment that one out, and we move on. This one, we need to print a full name, so first and last name of the author, all in caps. So there's a couple ways we could approach this. The easiest way is just to capitalize one string. So we combine the two, first and last, and then capitalize. If you wanted to, though, you could take capital first and then capital second, capital first name, capital last name, then combine them, and that works just as well, but it's easier to just do it once, and it's also faster. So the other thing is we have full name in caps up here, so we need to use as. So let's start by printing full name. So we have a select from books, and what we need to do is concat, and what are we concating? Author F name, comma, author L name. And I'll leave it like this for now, but hopefully you can predict what the problem is. When I do that, we don't have spaces. So let's add our space in. And that should give us the concatenated version. And, well, if we add the right comma. Now let's try it. There we go. So we get Jhumpa Lahiri, Dave Eggers, and so on with the spaces. So now what we want to do is just uppercase that. So we could do it on the same line because uppercase is so short. We can just say upper of that, copy it, paste it in. We also need to rename this up there. So we need as, and what did I call it? Full name in caps. So there's spaces in that. So we need to use quotes, full name in caps. Copy that. There we go, full name in caps. And if we want to format a little bit better here, we could do this. Just like that. And it will work just the same. Okay, let's comment that one out and move on. Make this happen. So what we have again is the title was released in, and then the year. So we're going to need to make use of concatenate. So let's start off with our select, and we'll have a concat, but we will also have from books, just like everything else we've done. So what are we going to concatenate? Well, first is the title. After the title, we have space was released in space. So we need those spaces, comma, like that. And we could just start with that if we want to take a look. And we get the namesake was released in. Norse mythology was released in. Then we just need to add in the year, comma, released year. And we haven't really worked with the year in a while, so if you forgot what the name of that column is, earlier when I was recording something, I ended up having to redo it because I was referring to year rather than released year. So you could just do a describe books and see that, okay, it's called released year. All right, so then we'll copy that in, paste it, and we get the namesake was released in 2003, and so on. The only thing we need to change is this up here. It's supposed to be called blurb, as blurb. And there we go. So we're done with that one. Comment it out. Next up, print book titles and the length of each title. So printing the title is easy. Then we just need to use char length and print the character length. So let's do that now. Select from books, and what do we want to select? Well, first we want title, and then after we select the title, we want char length. And one thing I should highlight there is that because this is a SQL file, you might have noticed I get these autocomplete suggestions. So I can either click or I can hit tab. And that's much faster in my experiences to hit tab. So we want the length of the title. Just like that. And we get the namesake 12, Norse mythology 15. And that's what we want, except we need character count. Just like that. However, this will cause an error. Whoops. We need to put it in quotes because there's a space there. Now we give it a shot, and it works. All right. Last one, I promise. So this one is more complex. 3 different things we're selecting. Each one is complex on its own. So let's tackle the first bit, the short title. So we want first 10 characters of the title plus ... So we'll comment this out. We'll do our same select from books. And we'll start by selecting the first 10 characters. So that's substring, or if you're lazy, whatever. Let's do substring. And we want it of title from 1 to 10, just like that. So that should just give us, at this point, you should know what it does. Gives us the first 10 characters, but we also want to concatenate that with ... So we'll do that here. Concat with the string ... not comma. We want ... And now if we copy that, that works, but it's supposed to be called short title. So we add as short title. And we just triple check our work. Looks good. Now we have our next thing we're selecting, which is the author, but we want last name, comma, first name. So it's going to be another concat actually, and we'll start with the author L name, comma, a comma in quotes, kind of hard to talk about, comma, but this comma here is actually going to be concatenated in. This is quite a string to look at there. Author F name. And we want it to be as author. So we don't have to use quotes for that. Let's try it. See if we made any mistakes. It looks good. So we get Lahiri, comma, Jumpa, Gaiman, comma, Neil. That's what we expect. And it's called author. Good. Finally, we need this last portion, quantity. And this should be the number in stock followed by the string in stock. So if you don't remember what the column name is, we can do describe books. And you can see, okay, we have stock quantity. So that's what we want to use. So this time we're starting off with stock quantity, comma, and then we want space in space stock. Just like that. And then we need to use as quantity. Boy, it's a long one. So let's try it out. Make sure we didn't do anything wrong. And that looks good. 32 in stock, 154 in stock. And then we have author and short title both working. Now, one thing I want to point out here, that stock quantity is a number, it's an int, but it doesn't break everything. Concat is okay with numbers like this. What it does is it just takes the string version, the text version of 32, and adds it to in stock. So it basically does this, 32 plus in stock. So that's very different than trying to add a number to text. All right, so that was a lot, I know, but we're done now. We're done with these string functions, and we're moving on. Hey, welcome back. So this section, as you may have guessed, we're continuing on with our books data. We're not doing cats, we're doing books. And primarily what we're going to do is focus on some more advanced MySQL features. Things like limiting the number of results that we get back. Instead of 10,000, I want 5. Then we'll see how to do things like sorting our results. I want the top 5 books sorted by sales or sorted by title alphabetically or by genre. All sorts of things we can do. And then from there, of course, at the end, we're going to have some fun exercises and challenges to wrap everything up. So let's get started. All right, welcome back. So in the last couple of sections, we focused on select, and we're going to continue that trend. In this section, we're going to talk about some of the other tools that we'll be able to use to get more specific when we're selecting things. So we'll be able to do things like sort our results that we get back in alphabetical order or reverse alphabetical order, or limit the number that we get, or only get unique results back, and a bunch of other things that we'll be able to combine and use just as other tools in our arsenal, or weapons rather, in our arsenal. So before we do that though, I want to start by just adding a little bit more data to the books that we're currently working with. Basically, I want to have a bit more variety, so I'd like to insert 3 new books, and they look like this. So we have one here, 10% Happier by Dan Harris, released in 2014. We have 29 in stock, and it's 256 pages long. You'll see why we have that, why we're inserting that in just a couple of videos, but there is a reason. We're going to come back to it. And then we have a fake book. So just imagine that we're testing our system or something, and we want to make sure it works. So we have fake_book, and then that's written by Frida Harris in 2001, 287 copies in stock, 428 pages. And then this is actually one, so I haven't read either of these, but this is one I just finished. And that's one of the reasons I added it in. There's another one though. It's really good, by the way, if you're looking for a book, called Lincoln and the Bardo by George Saunders, released just this year. And we have 1,000 copies in stock because it's brand new. So we haven't sold any, or we haven't sold many yet, or maybe we're anticipating a big flood of sales, and it's 367 pages. So either type that up or copy and paste it in. The code's available along with this video. And we're going to just copy and run over here, make sure that let's make sure we're working with the correct database. All right, in Bookshop, and we'll just paste that in. Insert into books, blah, 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 blah. We don't need to go over everything. All right, so we get 3 rows affected. Let's do a select title from books. Just make sure that we have those in there. Here we go. We had up to Consider the Lobster in the last section. Now we have 10% Happier, Fake Book, and Lincoln in the Bardo. All right, so that's all I wanted to do here. I highly recommend that you go and do this if you want to follow along. It will make the exercises much easier. It will make them possible in the first place. And you'll be able to type the code that I type on your own. So I highly recommend that you do it, but I guess you could just watch if you wanted to. So without further ado, let's get on to the new stuff. Now then, I don't really like now then. I use all right too much. Okay, how about up next, we're going to talk about distinct. So distinct is something that we use in conjunction with select. So when we're selecting data out, let's say we're doing something like give me all book titles from the database. And we may have duplicates in there, and we would get all those duplicates because we just asked for all titles. But if I say give me all distinct titles, it will do what that sounds like. It will only give us the distinct or unique titles. So without further ado, let's take a look at it in use. So here's an example. The first thing that you should notice is that distinct comes right after select. So we're saying select author last name. So there's a bunch of authors, and in our table, some books have, or some authors have multiple books. So David Foster Wallace, for example, has 2 books in there. So when we say select author last name, we get 2 results. We get David Foster Wallace, and then again, if we're only doing last name, we get Foster Wallace and Foster Wallace. So if I wanted to know only the unique or the distinct author last names in my books table, I would write this query here. Select, and the only thing that's different is the distinct. So select distinct author name from books. So let's try it out. We'll go over here, make some space, and let's just start, just to show you what I'm talking about, by select author without the distinct from books. Just like that. And as you can see, we have Gaiman who's in here twice, Eggers is in there twice, Carver is in there twice, Foster Wallace is in there twice, and Harris is in there twice. However, there's something kind of weird about Harris that we'll take a look at in just a moment. So if we only want to just get a survey of all the authors in our database, but we don't want duplicates, it's as simple as select distinct author L-name from books. Just like that, hit enter. Now it's much shorter because those duplicates are gone. So now we only have one Gaiman, one Eggers, one Foster Wallace, and one Harris. And of course we could do that for other things. So let's try it for years. So we have select released year from books. You can see, let's see, are there some books that have duplicates? So for example, 2003, there's two 2003s at least. I think there's multiple, at least one more when I designed this or when I created the data. But let's just focus on 2003. So there's two of them there. So if we do a select distinct released year from books, our list is shorter, and now we only have one 2003. So the reason I show it to you is not just to show you another way or another example, but also we're working with numbers here. And that's important to remember that released year is an int. It's not a varchar, but distinct still works. There's one more advanced thing that I want to talk about here, which has to do with when we did our select. Let's start again with author L name from books. When we did this, remember that and actually let's do author F name and L name. So when we did this, remember we have Neil Gaiman twice and Dave Eggers and so on, but then there was Dan Harris and Frida Harris, two different people, two different authors with the same last name, which is a pretty common situation. So when I do distinct, select distinct author L name from books, it reduces them, to just the distinct last name, which is what you would expect. It only gives us Harris once, which makes sense. We're asking for distinct author last names. But what about distinct full names? What if I want every distinct author's full name printed out? So basically, what if I just want to know how many distinct authors there are? Not just based off of last names or just first names, but both need to be distinct so that Dan Harris is distinct from Frida Harris. There are a couple ways of doing it. One, you already know at this point. You can use concat. So I'll show you that now. What we could do is concat author F name and author L name, and then ask or select distinct versions of those. So if I make a new file, this one won't be too long, but I'll make a new directory first, and I'll just call it refining selections. You don't have to do this, but I'm getting a little messy in here, so I want to make a new file in that directory, and I'll just call it distinct.sql, the most important part. Okay, so in here, right now we have our select distinct author L name from books. So let's start off by just running this, make sure that our file is working. One thing I will point out, I don't recommend putting spaces in your directory names. It's just not a great idea. So I'm going to edit that. It won't break anything. We can still do it, but it's just not great. So let's just do like that. Refining elections, well, that might work too, but refining selections. Alrighty, so if we want to run it, it's a source refining underscore selections / distinct dot SQL semicolon, and it works. Okay, so back to the problem at hand. How do we actually get just distinct authors first name and last name. So what we could do, I'll comment this out for now, is a select, and then we can concat author first name and author last name, just like that, from books. And if we save and run that now, we get this. And if we try and do distinct on that whole thing, that works. We get Dan Harris and Frida Harris are distinct. And we only have one Neil Gaiman, one Dave Eggers, and so on. And of course, we could go add the space that we want there and try doing it again. And that gives us distinct full names like this. That's one way, but there's actually an easier way. And that's using distinct. We just do a select distinct. And if you do author, we can do F name first or L name. Just separate them by a comma. And we try running that now. You see, we only get unique rows back. So it's basically applying distinct to the entire row. So in this case, it's basically saying I want the combination of the first name and last name to be distinct. So that's why we end up with one Neil Gaiman, one Dave Eggers, and one Dan Harris, and one Frida Harris. So it works in that way. The only difference here, aside from this being longer, is that here we're actually just combining them and checking if it's distinct. Here, MySQL is doing that for us. And it depends just how you want your results printed out. If you want them combined as a full name, then this method works better. And if you just want to keep your data separate in two different columns, then this is much easier and a little bit shorter. All right, so that's pretty much all there is to distinct. At its core, it's pretty simple, and it's powerful too. It's something we'll use quite a bit throughout the course. As our data gets more complicated, we'll also have more duplicated data, which isn't a bad thing. But sometimes when you're trying to understand it or work with it, you only want distinct data. So you use distinct. All right, I should shut up. Moving on along to our next topic. I guess that's okay, moving on along. I'll keep using that. Our next topic here is order by. So as the subtitle tells you, it's how we can sort our results, which is something that we'll want to do. Hopefully you see why that's useful when you're trying to understand things. It's good to be able to sort your data. So with our books, for instance, right now we're getting them all in the order that they were inserted in. And maybe we want to do things like find the best-selling books or the worst-selling books, or find the most active users on our website or the least active users, or something similar. Find the most upvoted posts or the post that has the most comments on our blog, or whatever we're working with. It's important to be able to sort things. And again, the way we do that is by using order by. So let's take a look at an example. Here's a query that's going to select all the author last names from books. So up until this point, nothing is new. Select author last name from book or books. But after that, we add on this little thing, order space by. That's something that trips me up, by the way, that there is a space. Sometimes it feels like it should be one word or there should be an underscore, but there's a space. Order space by. And then what do we want to order it by? By the last name. So let me show you. If we go here, we just do a select author L name from books. This should be review. What we get them in the order they were inserted. So that's not alphabetical at all. So if we want to do alphabetical, select author L name from books, order by, and then we have to say author L name, just like that. And as you can see now, we have Carver up top, all the way down to Steinbeck. And you should notice it is sorted by default in ascending order. So from C or A, technically down to Z. And it's actually alphanumeric as well. So if we do titles, for instance, let's just do select title from books. We've got a title that has an A at the beginning, but we also have 10% happier. So if we do this, select title from books, order by title, you'll see we get the 10% happier first before the A's and all the way down to W. So as I mentioned, it is ascending by default. So if you don't specify an order, it just assumes you want ascending. But of course we can change that, as my slide says, by just providing one thing at the end. So everything up until this point is the same. Select author L name from books, order by author L name, space, DESC. And in my opinion, this is also something that's kind of confusing because it's DESC, but then the abbreviation for ascending is ASC, which is only 3 letters versus 4, but that's just my opinion. So let's try it now. If we recall what we had, select author L name from books, order by author L name. There we go. This is the original in default ascending order, but if we add DESC, you can see it's reversed. Now it goes from Steinbeck down to Carver. Or if we do the same thing with our title, and we just add on DESC, it now goes from white noise down to 10% happier. And of course, order by will also work with numbers. So it's pretty common that we want to sort things numerically, whether it's, the number of orders or sort the highest priced items, or like I said earlier, sort the blog posts by whichever have the most comments, most to least, or something like that. Those are numeric values. So to do that, it's the exact same syntax. All that we change is what we're ordering by. So in this case, released year, which is released year, which is an integer. Select released year from books, order by released year. So let's try it out. Let's do a select released year from books without the order by. And they're in all sorts of crazy order. I think our lowest one is 1945 all the way up to 2017, which is that Lincoln in the Bardo book. Definitely recommend it still. So if we recall that line and just add on order by released year, there we go. And by default, it's also ascending, 1945 up to 2017. We could reverse it with DESC, just like that. And just to prove to you, you can do this. You can be explicit with ASC, ascending, and get the same order if you left it off. And not to harp on this too much, but I don't like that this is 4 letters versus 3 letters. It should be consistent. So if we leave it off, though, we get the same results. Okay, so that's the basics of order by. Another thing I'd like to highlight here is that we've been doing things like select released year, order by released year, where it's matched. What we're selecting is matching how we're ordering it. You don't have to do that. So let's say we wanted to get, let's say we want title and year, released year, that is, and pages, why not? And I want all 3 of those from books, order by, and we'll do released year. So I can do that, and it's going to order them by the release year, but still gives me all the data. So it's not like, it has to match. Or I could even leave release year out of this entirely. I don't have to select it, but I can still order by. So I could select title and pages and order by the released year. You can see the first one we get is Cannery Row, and the first one we got here is Cannery Row from 1945. And the last one was Lincoln in the Bardo, 2017. Last one is Lincoln in the Bardo, 2017, even though we don't have the year actually printing out. So that's all I want to show there, that you don't have to be ordering by something that you're selecting, or that it doesn't have to be the only thing that you're selecting. So here's another little quirk of order by. If you take a look at this query, select title, author F name, author L name, and I put this on 2 lines here, not because it's correct to do that, but just so that it's easier to read for you. So select title, author F name, and author L name from books, order by 2. What do you think the 2 refers to? Well, in this case, it's actually just a shortcut. So we don't have to rewrite author F name. So if we're selecting title, author F name, and author L name, this will be 1, this is 2, and this is 3. And it's a shortcut for me to say order by 2, author F name. So let's copy it over, try running it. And you can see the results we get back. They're not sorted alphabetically here, even though it sort of looks like it because we have 10% happier and then a hologram for the king, 10 and then A, but it's not. The rest of the way is not. But you can see over here, we've got Dan first, and then David, Dave, Data, Don, Frida, blah, 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 down to Raymond. And if we wanted to sort instead by last name, we just change it to 3, again, because author L name is the third thing that we're selecting. And now we go from Carver down to Steinbeck. And likewise, we could change it to 1 to sort by title. And we could also switch it over to descending, and that works. And if we did switch the order here, just to show the order does matter. So if I do author L name, comma title, if I want to sort by title, I would need to do 2 now. And now they're sorted by title. Okay, so there's one last thing, and I made a slide to remind myself about it, which is this here. So what we can actually do is sort by or order by 2 different columns, which seems like something that you wouldn't really do that often, and truth be told, it's not. But I just want you to know that you can. So to show you what I'm talking about, let me first do a select, and I'll make a new file for this one as well, just because we're going to have a little bit of code. Let's do new file. I'll just call it order underscore by.sql. Okay, and if we do a select author F name, comma author L name from books, just like that, save it, and we need to do our source order by.sql, just like that. And I forgot the directory, refining selections / Okay, so when I do that, we get first and last names are not sorted. So now if I do an order by author last name, and I redo it, everything looks good. We have our authors sorted alphabetically, Carver, Gaiman, Harris, but then that's where we run into our problem, which is Harris. And it's not really a problem, but if we wanted our authors sorted alphabetically, technically when there's 2 authors that have the same last name, and we want the entire author name to be sorted alphabetically, well, then we need to go to the first name. And in this case, Frida Harris is in front of Dan Harris, even though D comes before F. So we want Dan to come before Frida. And that's where this comes in handy. We can sort after we sort by last name, then sort by first name. So it's not going to redo everything. It's going to keep basically the initial sort and then sort first name if there's any conflicts. So we can just add that in as a comma, author, F name, and save. Now, if you just focus here, so we have Frida Harris and then Dan Harris. And if I source that and run it, you can see it just switched. So everything else is the same. Carver first, Steinbeck last. But now Dan Harris comes before Frida Harris. All right, so that's actually it to order by. I saw a lot there. It's a little bit dense. I apologize. But order by is useful. Like I said, you'll be sorting lots of things, and it helps you understand your data, especially when we're talking about sales data or site-specific data. There's a lot of insights that you can get just by putting it in an order. Next up in our toolbox is limit. So limit allows us to specify a number for how many results that we want to select. So I could say things like, I want the first 2 best-selling books rather than all best-selling books, or the top 10 most recent books. So we often use it in conjunction with order by or sorting, because that typically is going to give you something meaningful rather than just saying, select all books and give me the first 2. Well, how is first defined? And we can do that. I'll show you that. If we do a select, let's just do title from books. The order that we get them right now, again, is the order they were added. So we have the namesake, Norse mythology, American gods, and so on. So I could limit this. And the syntax looks like this. I just add limit at the end, just like we added order by. Limit, let's say 3. And now I just get those first 3. So it's going to limit it to the first 3, whether they're sorted or not. It doesn't care. It just chops it off right there. So again, it's not that useful or that meaningful just to do it on its own like this. But we could do, limit 1, limit 10, and so on. And that's basically all that there is to limit. We can do it with a select star. If I only want, let's say I want everything about the first book. There we go. I get the namesake and there's everything about it. But more often than not, we're using it with order by. So here's an example. If I want the 5 most recently released books, I'm going to, and I only want the title and the release year in this case. So select title and release year from books. Then I'm going to order them by the release year, descending. And then I'm going to limit it to the first 5. So let's try it. I'll go ahead and make a new file again, limit.sql. And in there, I'll write a select title, comma, released year from books. I won't add limit yet. Let's just make sure our source is working. So we'll do a source, refining, why did I name this so long? Refining selections / limit.sql. Fortunately, we only have to type it once. Okay, so that's working. So now what we'll do is order them by that released year. So we'll do an order by, and we could write release year, and I will because it's more specific, or it's easier to understand. It's more semantic to write it out, even though it's longer. But of course, we could replace it with 2, as we just saw in the last video. So order by that release year. If I do that now, that gives us all the books ordered in ascending order based off of their year, which is not what we want. So we can switch that with DESC. There we go. And now I can limit it to 5. And so that limit comes last as well. So it's going to do everything and then chop it wherever you specify. So that's important to know. So let's try it now. Make sure I save. And there we go. The 5 most recent books. And of course, we can change this to whatever number you want. If you want the 1 most recent book, or if we wanted, let's say 14, we can do that. So there are a few other ways we can use it. For example, here's the same query. However, I've written it slightly different. So everything up until this point, right here, is the same. Limit. But this time I'm saying limit 0, 5. So if we just copy this, I won't make you watch me type that whole thing out. And I comment this out. And I try running this now. Just take a guess. What do you think will happen? And here we go. It does the exact same thing. So this is a syntax that allows us to specify a starting point and then how many we want to go from there. So basically it's saying, and this is kind of confusing because it starts at 0. So the first row in a table is the 0th row. But then when we're dealing with strings, like when we had hello world, H is actually the first character in MySQL at least. So anyways, it's saying I want the first row and I want to go for 5 rows. So we could change that. I only want 3 rows this time. If we rerun it, it gives us the first 3 rows. But then I could shift it. Let's say I want to go, I don't know why, but the second row onwards. So it gives us Norse mythology, 10% happier, and the circle. If you didn't catch that before, when it was 0, we got Lincoln and the Bardo, Norse mythology, and 10% happier. When I change this to 1, it shifts the starting point. So it's not that, it's not common at all, but you could do things like 10, 1. And what this will do is go to the 11th book. Well, I need to save first. Now if I run it, it will give us the 11th book. And just to make sure that we're right there, if we rerun it now, we could count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and we get fake book. So if you need to access very particular rows based off of order, that is a way that you can do it. It's just honestly not that common. Pretty much every time that I use limit, it's in a context like this. Limit 1 or the first 3 or the first 5 or something like that. But I'll give you a real reason you might use it. Let's say that you have a blog site that you've created and your blog has thousands of articles in it already. When a user visits the blog page, you don't show them all 1,000, or let's say 10,000 results all at once for every blog post that you've written. That would be overwhelming, and there's too much information to display. Most likely what you'll do is have the first 10 posts, And then I can click a next button and it will load from post 11 to 20. And I can keep clicking next and so on. You've probably seen that before. It's called pagination. So you can do that by, rather than selecting everything from your database, you could select from 0, and I only want the first 10. And then the next time through, you could select from 10, and I want 10 more, and so on. So that is a situation where you could use that limit and provide a range like that. But again, most of the time, I just use this limit and then one number. The very last thing I'll show you is that this is actually straight from the docs from MySQL. I think it's really clunky and weird that they even specify this. If you wanted to select from one row all the way to the end of the table, so I want from row 5 all the way to the end, we might have however many thousand rows. There isn't a nice, elegant way of doing it. This is what you have to do. Select star for whatever you're selecting from whatever table, limit, and then where you want to start, comma, some gigantic number. And I'm not kidding you, I actually have it in the docs here. Right, where is that? Right here. To retrieve all rows from a certain offset up to the end of the result set, you can use some large number for the second parameter. So that's their official suggestion on how to do it. Select star from table, limit 95, comma, some gigantic number that you would know you never have that many rows in your table. So we could actually do that here. If we just do a select title from books, order by, and let's just say I want to go, we don't even need the order by, honestly. Let's just do a limit. And if we just do limit 5, that's going to give us the first 5. But if I want to go from 5 to the end, I can do limit 5 and then some gigantic number. And in our case, it doesn't even have to be that gigantic because we don't have that many books. But if I do that, it gives us everything after 5, or technically 6 because it starts at 0. So I could reduce this down. I could just do like 50. And it gives us the same thing because we don't have 50 books. So it just goes until the end. So that's it to limit. With all those weird things that I showcased and the odd situations and ways you can use it, the most common and the way that almost always that I use it is this. Just limit and then a single number. Alrighty, so that's it. Moving on to one more and then we're done. For this section at least. We're not done with the whole course. Alright, so we have one more video here, or at least one more tool for the toolbox before we get to the exercise at the end of this section. And that tool is something called like. And I'll start off by saying like is very useful. It basically allows us to perform better searching of our data. So if you think of when we saw how to use where would allow us to find exact matches. So I could do things like select star from books where title is exactly Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But what if I wanted to select all Harry Potter books? I would want to do something like select star from books where title contains Harry Potter or starts with Harry Potter or something like that. And we don't have a way of doing that yet until now with like. So like allows us to do things like this. Imagine someone comes into your bookstore, if we have a bookshop, and they say, there's a book I'm looking for. But I can't remember the title. I think the author's first name is David, or maybe it's Dan or Dave. And you could go over to your system as a really helpful bookstore employee, and you could just search for, let's say, books written by authors whose first name starts with DA, which I guess is a very broad category, but you could still do that. If you searched for authors at like a Barnes & Noble or a popular bookshop or Amazon, you can do that type of search, and it will work. It's just not that common. But we could do the same thing for books, like I said. Harry Potter is a good example, where we want to search for all the Harry Potter books, not just the exact one, word for word matched or character for character matched. So that's where comes in. Now, I'll warn you, it's going to look a little bit odd when I show it to you, but that's okay. It's not that complicated. There's just some weird symbols here. So here's an example of using like. Where, so this is ignoring the first part of the query, the select star from, or the update, or the delete, or whatever it is. So blank, where, author, F name, like, and then in quotes, I have this %, DA %. So I'll tell you, first of all, what this is going to do is find where the author's first name has the letters DA in it. And these little things here, those percentage symbols, kind of like that animation there, those are known as wildcards. So that's basically the way that we specify we want to find author first names where there's something, anything at all. It's a wildcard. So any characters, and then these two exact characters, DA, and then anything afterwards. So it's basically a way of saying whatever blank, anything, DA, and then whatever anything else afterwards. And if we try using this right now, actually, you'll see what happens. If we go over here and we do a select, and let's just do a title and author F name from books where, and then we'll do author F name like, and then this is where we need those wildcard symbols, and we'll put DA in between. So once again, this is saying anything followed by DA, exactly DA. So it can't be D and then S and then A. It has to be DA and then anything afterwards. So if I hit enter now, you'll see that it works. We get these authors, Dave, David, Dan, and Frida. And you might notice, well, Frida, that doesn't start with DA, and you would be right. It ends with DA, but it still meets this query's it still meets the conditions for this query, which is anything, DA, anything. So in this case, it's FREID, or FREI is meeting this, and then we have DA, and then this wildcard, there's nothing afterwards, and that's perfectly fine. This is not saying there has to be something after the D and the A or something before. As you can see, we're matching DA, VE, so there's nothing before it, that's fine, then DA, and then VE afterwards. So basically this is all about pattern matching. And if we wanted to refine this so that we only get author first names that start exactly with exactly with DA, we can do it like this. All we do is leave off that first wildcard, that first %, and that says, I want to find author first names where they start with DA and then anything afterwards. So it could be Dana, David, Dave, Dan, Darwin, whatever. So if we just make that one small change and we delete that %, you can see Frida is gone. I'm sorry, Frida, because Frida no longer fits the pattern that we're matching. Also, it's important to note that it is case insensitive, as you can see. This is lowercase d and a, and it still matches all these uppercase d's and lowercase a's. So if I wanted to do something slightly different, let's say search all books where the title has the word the somewhere in there. It's pretty simple. It's just a select title from books where title like. And if I just say the, that's only going to give me books where it's exactly the, and that's not what we want. So we want something followed by the, and if we just leave it like this, that's not going to give us anything because this is specifying we want books where the title has anything and then ends with the letters THE. That's not really what we want. So we'll add another wildcard at the end, and now that gives us all the books that have a title that has something, then THE, and then something else afterwards. So you can see we get the namesake, a hologram for the king, the circle, the amazing adventures of Cavalier and Clay, Consider the Lobster, and then Lincoln and the Bardo. Really good book, by the way. I know I've said that like 10 times. It's a good book. So that's the basics of using like. These % are very common. I know it looks kind of odd, but this is really, really important. Think of when you're searching, I don't know, if you use Reddit, if you're ever searching for things on Reddit, behind the scenes, like is being employed. Or if you're searching on whatever site you search on, there's some form or variation of this like going on, where your query, whatever you search for, it's not only matching exactly. So when I search for, on Amazon, I type in, let's just go with let's say Lord of the Rings. I search Lord of the Rings. It's not only going to give me books that have a title exactly of Lord of the Rings. It's going to give me books that have Lord of the Rings in the title somewhere. Obviously, their search is much, much more complicated, where it also searches things like, through comments and reviews and related books. And there's this whole complicated graph network of how the search works. But the core idea, the simplest search that you could implement, uses like. So that's the basics. But there's another wildcard character that I'll show you, which is the underscore. So here I have a really weird query. This is 4 underscores in a row. You'll just have to trust me that it's 4, and it was hard to tell. What this will do, so we're searching stock quantity, which is a number, and we're trying to find where it's like 4 underscores. And basically an underscore is a wildcard to specify exactly one character. Any character, but exactly one. So 4 of them in a row is saying, I want to find where the stock quantity is 4 characters long. So let me show you why we might want to do that. If I do a select stock, let's do title and stock quantity from books, just like that, you can see that we have stock quantity of 2 digits, 32, 43, 3 digits. Geez, it's giving me a tough time. Digits, 154. And then this great book, linking in the Bardo, has 1,000 copies in stock. It's brand new. People don't know about it yet. They're not buying it. I'm sure people will buy it soon, though. Once, of course, they realize what a great book it is. So if I wanted to select books where stock quantity is 4 digits long, I could use that wildcard. So let me just show that again. So select title and stock quantity from books where stock quantity like, and all I have to do, so just to clarify, if I did this, that wildcard just means anything. So that's going to give us everything. And if I do 4 of them, it doesn't make a difference. That's not saying 4 characters. That's just 4 different ways of saying anything at all. It could be nothing. It could be 1,000 characters. It doesn't matter. So by adding underscores, that's 4 there, you'll see I get Lincoln in the Bardo. Or I could do 2 underscores, and I only get the 2-digit stock quantities. Now, that's not to say the only time you use underscores is when you're trying. Yes, Blue. It's my cat. Are you going to say hi? She's now sitting on the computer. Okay, so back to where I was. Get this cat hair out of here. The underscore is not only used, and actually it's not even primarily used for counting digits like that, but it's a way of specifying exactly one character, like I said. Let's say that we're working with phone numbers, and in the US, they might look something like this. So we have an area code in parentheses, and then 3 digits dash 4 digits. And if we wanted to match that pattern, we would have something that looks like this, like, and we'd have our first parenthesis. And if we just put this wildcard there, that's going to say any number, any letters, whatever it is, in between those parentheses, but we're actually looking for 3 digits. And then another 3 digits after that parenthesis, then a dash, and then 4 digits. So basically, we have these 2 wildcards at the end of the day. %, which means anything or nothing, and then underscore, which is exactly one thing. And you can chain them together to match patterns. Then that brings up another question, which is, but what if I'm searching for a book that has a % in it? How would I do that? And you may have noticed that I expertly planted a book title with a % in it. I was thinking ahead for once. How would we select that? Or there's also a book title that's not so creative that has an underscore in it. How would I select that one? If these characters are special wildcard characters, how do I actually search for the exact character % or the exact character underscore? And the answer is actually pretty straightforward. We use what's known as an escape character. In this case, I always forget which one's backwards and forward slash, but whichever slash this is, the one over the enter key, I'm pretty sure that is backslash. So backslash % is going to match a %. So this entire thing right here is basically saying %. Likewise with underscore, it's backslash underscore is the escape character. So let's put that into practice. Let's try it out. So we'll select title from books, and we'll just do that first of all, and you'll see we've got 10% happier and then fake underscore book. So let's start with 10% happier. So I want to select title from books where title like, and just, I mean, this should be clear by now, but if we tried to do this, that's not going to work. That's going to give us everything. But if I tried to say, okay, %, that means anything, and then a %, and then anything afterwards, that's not going to work either, because that's basically just 3 different ways of saying anything at all in the title. So that's where we need our backslash. And now what you could read this as, you could condense this to say exactly a %, 1 percentage sign, anything before, anything after. And there we go. That's how we get 10% happier. Same thing with the underscore. I won't go through that whole routine again. We just replace that backslash % with backslash underscore, and that gives us fake book. All right. So that's all that there is to like for now. It's very, very useful. We'll be using it quite a bit in this course. It's probably one of the most commonly used things in MySQL or in SQL when doing queries. In all likelihood, you won't be matching % signs or underscores all that often, but you'll be doing things like this all the time, where you're using the % wildcard and the underscore wildcard to match patterns. Okay, next up, exercises. Okie dokie, artichoke. Yep, that's how I'm starting this video off. It's your turn. So we've covered 4 different things here, 4 new tools for this mysterious magical toolbox. We've got distinct, as well as order by, and then limit, and then finally like. And you're going to put those to use along with some of the stuff you've learned up until this point with a couple of exercises. And there are some clown emojis here to show you how excited you should be, and they're not at all creepy. So here's the first thing I need you to do, or I'd like you to do. Please do it. Select all story collections. So some of these books have titles that contain the word stories, which tells you that they're a collection of stories. What we talk about when we talk about love, stories. Really good read, by the way. Where I'm calling from, selected stories, oblivion, stories. So using what we just saw, and that's something I just want to point out, for all of these exercises, there are ways that you could directly select things maybe a little bit easier, or you could cheat in a way, but make sure that you do it the way that I specify, please, using the things you just learned. So specifically, titles that contain the word stories. Not exactly stories, but something that contains stories in it. So that's the first one. All right, and then the next one, find the longest book in the entire database or in the entire books table. So this is what you should get back. Print out the title and the pages. The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay is 634 pages. Of course, don't just select based off of where pages is exactly 634 or where the title is The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Please do it the right way so that your query would always work no matter how many books are in the table and what they're named and how many pages they have. It will always get the longest book. Okay, just one. Then the next problem, print a summary. In our case, a summary contains the title, dash, the year. And print only three of the most recent books. So 2017, 2016, and 2014. So again, a summary. And it says up here, it says summary, so that remember how to do that. The title, dash, the year it was released, and then only print out the 3 most recently released books. All right, next up is find all the books whose author's last name contains a space character. And it's only David Foster Wallace in our case. Don't cheat and just say where author L name is exactly Foster space Wallace. But how can you find any author last name that has a space in it? And then once you do that, find the 3 books with the lowest number in stock, the lowest stock quantity. So as you can see here, we've got American Gods has 12, Where I'm Calling From has 12, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love has 23. And I'd like you to print the title, the released year, and the stock quantity. So just to reiterate, the 3 lowest stocks. All right. Then we have this one. Print the title and the author last name. So we've got title, author L name, sorted by the author's last name. So this is all of the books, by the way. So sort by the author last name, and then sort by title. Because some of these authors, for example, Carver or Eggers or Gaiman, have multiple books. So if we look at Carver, for instance, Carver has what we talk about, blah, 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 where I'm calling from. What we talk about comes before where I'm calling from, alphabetically, if that makes sense. Same thing with Eggers. A heartbreaking, a hologram, the circle. So sort first by the last name of the author, and then on top of that, the title. Then we've got this one, just make this happen. It's kind of difficult to write out exactly what's happening. The main idea is that we're going to go through every book. You're going to print out this string here. My favorite author is, and this is yelling in all caps. I won't wake my neighbors. It's kind of late. But my favorite author is, and then the author's first name capitalized, and the author's last name capitalized, and an exclamation point at the end. And do that for every book, sorted alphabetically by the author's last name. So you can see Carver comes first, Eggers, Foster Wallace, Gaiman, down to Steinbeck. And then make sure you call it yell up here. Yes, it's a bit of a complicated one, but fortunately it's last. Hopefully you can make this one work. It's a little bit long. Good luck. See you in the solution video. All right. So hopefully you made it through those exercises, or maybe you're just wanting to watch the solutions, or maybe you're here accidentally. However you got here, what I'm going to do in this video is go over the solutions to the previous video. And that's a bad noise. Why'd that happen? All right. So the first one, select all story collections. So those are titles that contain the word stories in them somewhere. And we just want to print the title. So I'm going to go over here and make some space. And the first thing that I'll do is just make a new file. And I'll just call it exercises.sql. And then I'll open that up. And we'll start off with this first one. Select title from books. And we'll start there. Just make sure we're doing everything correctly. Source, refining, selections, / exercises.sql. Make sure that, okay, it's working, selecting the titles. So now we only want the ones that contain stories. So that's going to be a where, and we're going to do title, like, and this is, if we just do stories, it's not going to work. That gives us exactly stories. We're going to want that wildcard character, just like that. And now we get what we're looking for. Technically, with our specific data, we could leave that last percentage sign off, that last wildcard, because all of the books that contain the word stories, it comes at the end. But that may not always be the case. There might be a book out there called My Favorite Stories for Kids, or something like that. And if we wanted this truly to just find all books that have stories in the title, we need both of those wildcard characters. All right, so that's the first one. Next up, find the longest book. So print out the title and the page count for the one longest book. So we'll go ahead and comment this line out. And let's just do a select title and pages from books, just like that to start. Okay. So now what we want to do is sort them. We'll sort them by the pages. So that's an order by pages. And if we just do the default sort, remember that we get ascending rather than descending, which is what we want. What we're going to do is use limit to give us the first result. But right now, if we do limit 1, it's going to give us the shortest book rather than the longest one. So we want to reverse that sort with the descending order. So now the first one is the longest. And then we just add our limit 1. And we run it again and again and again. And it always works. And so whatever book has the longest page count will always be what is printed out here. All right. So that's that one. Let's comment it out and move on. Print out a summary containing the title and year for the 3 most recent books. So this one required you to not only use order by and limit. We're ordering by most recent year and then limiting to 3, but you also needed to use concatenate to concatenate the title with a dash with a year. So let's do that now. Let's just start by doing the select concat, and it was title, comma, and then we have a space and a dash and a space, comma, released year. And we'll start with just that from books. Save. Okay. Oh, the other thing we wanted to do is clean this up so it says summary up there. So this is also review. We'll say as summary. Okay, so now we get that. Now we want to order them by most recent. And let's break this up onto some different lines here. From books, order by, and we'll order by released year. And if we try that now, we also see that it does work, but it's in the opposite order that we want. We want most recent, so we need to reverse that again with descending. And then finally, we want to limit it to the first 3. Limit 3. Or if you want to get fancy, we could do this, but I don't like doing that. So that's much easier. Okay, so that gives us Lincoln in the Bardo 2017, Norse Mythology 2016, 10% Happier 2014, summary. That's all good to go. Next up, find all the books that have an author last name containing a space. And don't cheat by just doing Foster Wallace. So let's comment this out first. And this one's actually pretty short and easy. It's just a select, and we're looking for title and author L name. Select title, comma, author L name, where author L name, like, and of course we can't just say space because that's only going to find authors whose last name is exactly space. And it looks like, oh, I'm forgetting from books. Hopefully you caught that before I did. But back to what I was saying, this isn't going to work because we don't have any authors whose last name is space. So what we want is that wild card on either side. Anything with a space and then anything afterwards. Now we get Foster Wallace. And that's it for that one. Next up, find the 3 books with the lowest stock. So we want the title, the release year, and the stock quantity. 3 books with the lowest stock. So let's start with commenting this out, just like we've done with all the others. Select title. What else was it? Released year and stock quantity. Okay. Just like that. And we'll have our from books. We'll start there, make sure that works. Okay, so now what we want to do is sort them by stock quantity. So that's just an order by stock quantity. And you can see that gives us the order we want. We want them to be in ascending order this time rather than descending because we're looking for the lowest stock quantity, 12 all the way up to 1,000. Okay, and then we want to limit it to 3. I don't know why I picked 3 so many times in these exercises. Let's try it now with that limit 3. And there we go. American Gods, where I'm calling from, what we talk about when we talk about love. That's what we're looking for. Then we've got this one. Print the title and author last name sorted first by author last name and then by title. So let's get the title and author last name to print first. Select title, comma, author L name from books, just like that. And at this point, we all know what that does. So now let's sort by the author last name. So that's just a simple order by author L name. And that gives us the alphabetical order we're looking for. So we don't need to use descending. That's all right. But then if you look over here, if we take Carver's books, notice that where I'm calling from comes before what we talk about when we talk about love, even though WHA comes before WHE. So we want to now sort by title there. And the way we do that is not by just changing that to be title, because then it purely sorts by title and ignores author L name. Rather, we want to do this, author L name, comma, title. And there we go. Now you could also replace this whole thing with 2, 1, which I really don't like, just because it's not very semantic. It's not meaningful to look at this, but it is shorter. And again, that 2 is referring to author L name and 1 is referring to title. It's just the order that we're selecting them in. So I'm going to change it back, but I will also duplicate that below and change it to 2, 1 and comment that out as well, just so we have both solutions. Which brings us to the last problem. Hopefully it's the last. Okay, it is. Make this happen. So we want to yell, my favorite author is, and then the uppercase first name of an author, and then a space, and the uppercase last name of an author, and then exclamation point. Yeah, it's kind of a lot. Okay, so let's start with selecting, and we know already that, well, we can start with select from books, sure. What we're going to want to do is concatenate my favorite author is, and then an uppercase version of Raymond and a space, and then uppercase version of the last name. So, and an exclamation point. It's a lot of concatenation. So we're going to have a concat, and I'll just do this. Well, let's do it this way, just like that. What are we concatenating? Well, let's start without the uppercase, or without. So let's just start with my favorite author is, and we'll add a space, comma, and then we want author F name, and then we want another space, this space here, so they don't just run together, comma, author L name, finally an exclamation point. It's a lot. So let me drag this down a bit so we can see the whole query. Select the concatenation of my favorite author is, space, the first name of an author, space, the last name of an author, exclamation point. Let's save it and run it. It's pretty long. Oh, and this is partially messed up because you can see up here, the column heading here is this entire thing. So let's add the as yell. And now if I run it, there we go. Okay, so we're close. The next thing we need to do is capitalize author F name and author last name, which is easy. It's just an upper, like that. Save, rerun it. Okay, it's all uppercase now. We have one last thing, which is sorting alphabetically by the last name. So from books, order by author L name. Long query here. Let's try it. It looks like it worked. We got Raymond Carver all the way down to my favorite author is John Steinbeck. And that's about as loud as I'll yell in here. Don't want to wake my neighbors. All right. So congratulations. Hopefully you made it through this relatively unharmed. It's a lot of exercises, a lot of ordering by and limiting. But the reality is you'll use those a lot. It is very useful to be able to determine, the highest page count, maybe not, but the best selling book once we get to sales and users and stuff for the most active users, or like I keep coming back to the highest commented post, or the most trafficked, the most clicked on ad. All those sorts of bits of data are really useful, and you'll use order by and limit all the time, as well as other tools that we saw distinct and like. They're all very useful. All right. Well, I recommend you take a quick little break, and then we'll move on.